Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Thank you to Peter Cardwell. Welcome back. It is the home of common sense. 3 minutes after 1 o'clock. Loads to get through this afternoon, as you would imagine. Donald Trump says he'll work tirelessly to end the Ukraine war after receiving a positive letter from President Zelensky and strong signals from Russia that they are ready for peace. Well, house points all round if that happens. At what cost, of course, will be the inevitable conversation that follows. We'll continue to look at that story. Also this afternoon, almost 1 million people in England speak little to no English, with official figures showing 10% of foreign-born residents struggle with our language, fueling demands for stricter integration requirements. I mean, this would be a no-brainer in any other world. Let me ask you this. How crucial is a common language? There's lots of sort of splinter points, offshoots to this debate. We'll explore next. And Energy Secretary Ed Miliband, remember him, faces the axe in an up-and-coming cabinet reshuffle amid criticism of his net zero plans, accused of stifling growth with his drive to cut carbon emissions. He is the archdeacon of all things net zero based. It is a flipping religion to our Ed. Can't get his head out the sand, this fella. We'll look at that story as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. I think there's an anecdotal component to this question about language. When you see the figure or the headline that almost 1 million people, this is England alone, so we're not including Wales and Scotland, Northern Ireland in this, almost 1 million people speak little to no English. I love the next, causing concerns about integration. Well, there is no integration if you don't speak the language, right? That's just a fact. If you cannot speak the language, there is no integration. Official stats show that 10% of residents born overseas struggle with our language. And I'm asking the question, how crucial is a common language? And the reason I mention the anecdotal part of this is because I think what's fascinating is when you get into areas like healthcare and education. When your kid is in a class with a group of other kids and half a dozen of them don't speak the language, but there is some kind of translation system set up to accommodate those kids, and not blaming kids in this, but you begin to think, well, hang on, that's pretty crucial. I would suggest that would curtail or encroach on the quality of education for the rest of a class. Would that be reasonable? You might have experienced exactly that with your own kids. 0344 499 1000. If you get into the health service, then I think you're into an even more tricky department in terms of the amount of times this issue of translation is required. I mean, I've had it the other way around, where I couldn't quite understand the doctor, whose English was, in his own words, he apologised at the outset. This is while delivering a cancer diagnosis, pretty much, to my mother. And it was all, everything about it was just wrong. It was, you know, the guy was flustered because he was talking about something that is clearly life-changing. My mum, doing her old-fashioned politeness thing, was simply nodding along, saying thank you, as that generation, thank you very much. Now, Mum, you've just been told some pretty difficult news here, and I'm struggling to get the detail. The majority of migrants aged over 16 are able to speak English, 51.6%, stating it is their main language. I would say that's still quite low. 38.4% saying they can speak it okay. 8.6% can't speak it well. That's 800,000 people, by the way. A further 140,000 can't speak it at all. So we have a problem here. Startling figures fueling demands for stricter integration requirements. I don't know how you would, I mean, if somebody's coming across the channel look, you don't get turned back for any reason. So there's hardly going to be a language test at Dover, is there? I don't think Border Force are going to suddenly whip out the Janet and John book and ask you to start reading a couple of pages to test your integrity in the reading department. And we know about the translators as well. Now, I mentioned to Peter Cardwell, the Department of Work and Pensions, pretty much 30 million quid on translators in the last 5 years. So you want to go back a decade or two. I don't know how much money we're spending on this, in the health service, in education. In every government department, there will be an element where that figure, 30 million Department of Work and Pensions, is either the same as that or larger than that. I would imagine in the health service, you could probably stick a couple of zeros on the end of that. Keir Starmer, of course, has pledged to slash migration by requiring bosses to train more homegrown workers rather than hiring from abroad. Every Prime Minister, remember Gordon Brown wanging on about his British jobs for British workers. It was Gordon Brown said this. And, you know, he was, firstly, legally, we were in the EU at the time, you can't implement that. There was no legal brief or ability to be able to put that into place, even if you wanted to. Starmer is due to unveil his blueprint to cut arrival numbers in the coming months. He's not going to do it. He's not going to succeed at this because he can't solve the Channel migrant problem. I know that's only one part of the picture of the overall issue of immigration. He's unable to do so. The story of immigration is so much wider than just even legal migration, where people come over with a visa. Overstaying is a big issue. Training up homegrown talent, looking for new doctors and nurses. I mean, it's a massive, this is a task that would take decades if you were serious about it. I don't believe for 1 second Keir Starmer is serious about this. But it is, if you like, a fairly edgy example of the problems that immigration can throw up. Nobody is fully against any immigration. You know, even the most ardent right-wing politician in the land understands that we have an element of immigration. People fly all over the world, you know, doing jobs in different places, whether you're a scientist or a doctor or an engineer. But we're not really talking about scientists, doctors and engineers. And when it comes to speaking the language, you've got 1 million Brits that really can't speak the language properly. You're bound to ask that question about how critical is it? So your example, I'd like your overview on this story. Are you surprised by that number? And remember, this is just the English side of the story. So the number is going to be higher. 0344 499 1000. I remember speaking to a fellow that used to be the cab driver that took me home when I worked late nights, Bangladeshi guy, a top-notch fella. We used to talk about this kind of stuff quite a lot, and he said that his wife didn't speak any English, and very few of the wives of his cohort, if you like, in that neck of the woods spoke English, and there was no intention to learn English because, in his words, you know, we have our kind of own community. We sort of do our own thing. We stay within the law. We're not hurting anybody. Most of us work, but we don't have a desire to speak English. I mean, well, OK, you don't have a desire to speak English, but that's going to throw up some difficulties in certain settings, like schools, like the NHS, etc. So if you've been in that situation where you've been up against it, whether you work in those areas where you know what it's like to deal with somebody who simply can't speak the language, I'm asking this question not so that you can condemn individuals, but just explain the difficulty, the challenges, sometimes dangerous challenges, of people who can't speak the lingo. How crucial is a common language? 0344 499 1000. Our lines are open. We'll also continue to take your calls and comments as well on Trump and Zelensky and Putin and Starmer and Macron and good old JD Stamps, him as well. Thoughts on that? 0344 499 1000. Lines are open. Let's get a word on this story and the other big stories of the day. Chloe Dobbs, political commentator, is with us. How are you doing, Chloe?
Good, thank you. How about you, Ian?
Good. We've had to employ a language translator for those who can't understand the lovely dulcet tones of Chloe. So there'll be a pause after every answer so we can translate it. Is that all right?
No, I hope absolutely not. If they can't speak English, then they can watch another channel.
Yeah, there is that, absolutely, and there's plenty of options these days. So, I mean, let's start with what's happening with Trump and that speech in Congress. Are we a step closer to peace in Ukraine? Zelensky, we know, has written to Trump to say he's ready to sign the minerals deal. Let's have a little listen to what the US president said while addressing Congress yesterday.
Earlier today, I received an important letter from President Zelensky of Ukraine. The letter reads, Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible to bring lasting peace closer. Nobody wants peace more than the Ukrainians, he said. My team and I stand ready to work under President Trump's strong leadership to get a peace that lasts. We do really value how much America has done to help Ukraine maintain its sovereignty and independence. Regarding the agreement on minerals and security, Ukraine is ready to sign it at any time that is convenient for you. I appreciate that he sent this letter, just got it a little while ago. Simultaneously, we've had serious discussions with Russia and have received strong signals that they are ready for peace. Wouldn't that be beautiful? Wouldn't that be beautiful?
Wouldn't that be beautiful, Chloe? Of course, the question is, peace at what cost? That seems to be Zelensky's position.
Yeah, we've definitely seen a very quick change of tune from Zelensky. Very, very different position now to when he was sat in that Oval Office. Really seeming quite uncompromising. Who was the most responsible for them getting in a fight? It's hard to say. People are on different sides on this. I think both of them are partly responsible. But it's fair to say that meeting did not go well and was pretty disappointing for anyone that wants to see an end to the fighting in Ukraine. But then we had Trump say, well, I'm going to pull all of our aid out of Ukraine, which some people say that's incredibly harsh. But look, that worked. That was a great negotiation tactic. We know Trump is a fantastic negotiator, and straight away Zelensky has changed his tune, and it's really great to see that they're now going to be talking again on amicable terms, willing to make compromises, it seems. Now, Zelensky, he's not been exactly clear of exactly what he is willing to sacrifice for peace, but I think the fact that he is making clear that he's willing to come to some sort of peace deal suggests that now maybe he is willing to make some concessions to Putin. Maybe he is willing to give a small amount of land to Putin, whereas when he was sat in the Oval Office, he was saying you can't negotiate with a killer. So it's pretty drastic change.
It is a drastic change. Of course, I've heard it translated as, yeah, we'll give you peace if you give us loads of money. Is that a fair assessment of where America are at on this? I mean, the minerals thing, by the way, half an hour ago, no one talked about minerals. It sort of almost came out of nowhere, this minerals thing. And do we all get a piece of the mineral pie?
I don't know all the exact details of this mineral deal, but ultimately Ukraine will probably not agree to it if it's not favourable to them in some way. The US, they may benefit very well out of this. So we know that the US has benefited with oil and whatnot when they've got involved in wars elsewhere in the world. So I'm not surprised the US wants something out of it. They've given them a heck of a lot of money, so no surprise they want something in return. I think what's important to me is that when Ukraine, if this war ends and they're able to rebuild, that it is the case that they are able to become a wealthy society once again, as opposed to being a very impoverished society, because all of their money is being sent to America to pay back the money they were given during the war.
Indeed. And of course, America was just one country of men. I mean, they put a substantial amount of cash in there. I mean, an eye-watering number. We know that. But, so has the UK. And France and most other countries around the world have all dipped into the kitty to donate and give money and support and aid. So I don't know whether, and this is the bit that's not really explained. Firstly, I don't know whether that is just America saying, well, carve your own deal out then if you want. This is the one we're demanding. But I don't know whether how it guarantees the peace, other than the suggestion that if you are having a big mineral deal with Ukraine, there will be American personnel or American people working in Ukraine, and that forms a kind of almost like a human shield. Putin wouldn't go near if he thought there were Americans in large numbers working in that territory.
Yes, potentially. Maybe that is what Trump is thinking, is you have to give us some money and we'll give you the troops on the ground to make sure that Putin does not step an inch further. Because remember, the biggest worry that people have with ending this war now, whilst Putin has gained some territory, is, if you give him an inch, he'll take a mile. He might be quiet for a little amount of time, but then he's got further ambitions. He'll keep on going. So any kind of peace deal, in order to satisfy the people who are worried, who previously would have been of the mind that this war only ends if Ukraine can take back all of the land that they have had taken from them, you're going to have to put things in place to absolutely ensure that Putin cannot push his luck and cannot try to start the war again and push further. You saw Macron, when he was talking to Trump, not being quite so worried about getting money out of the Ukrainians, saying to Trump, no, we gave them a lot of money, simply, not expecting it back. Some of it may have been loan, but a lot of it would have just been grants. And he noted the fact that they've got loads of frozen Russian assets in Europe, and maybe they'll be able to, in a deal, get the Russians to say, oh, you can just have those, in order to essentially get some of their money back. So I think the Europeans are going to be less pushy with the Ukrainians to get money out of them.
Yeah. We're going to watch with interest. A word briefly, Chloe, on this one. I mentioned this at the very beginning. Nearly 1 million people in Britain can't speak English, raising huge concerns over migrant integration. I know you've just been part of a big TV show which looked at, this is one aspect of the migrant story, the journeys people make, the background they come from, what is going on in their personal circumstances, etc. It was eye-opening stuff, I'm sure more so for you because you were part of the programme. But it does feed into this question about, the insistence of people speaking the language or learning the language. 1 million people cannot speak English properly, and some not at all. This is a worrying picture, surely.
Yes, this is definitely bad news, and we know why this is the case. This is because it used to be, when there were small numbers of immigrants in the UK, that if you moved here, you simply had no choice but to suck it up and learn how to speak the language, else you're not going to survive, you're not going to meet any friends or anything. But now, because there are much larger numbers of immigrants in the country, and a lot of the time they live in specific areas, they have separate communities, you can just move to a community that is full of people that speak your home language and not have to integrate. There's also definitely a cultural issue with the women, people who expect their wives to be stay-at-home wives and to not really leave the house very much or speak for themselves when they go to the shops and whatnot. That is also stopping people from learning the language. And I just think it's basic respect, if you're going to go live in someone else's country, that you learn the language. If I were to move to a non-English speaking country, I would make it my top priority to immerse and learn the language. And it's also a big problem for the economy as well as the problem of just respect for the culture, because how are you going to be any good at working a job if you can't speak the language? I mean, even if you're not in a customer-facing role, you've still got to communicate with all of your colleagues and everything, right? I don't think there are many jobs that you can be much good at if you don't speak the language.
Well, you wouldn't have thought so, would you? I mean, that just kind of goes with the territory. And I know that there are, people often say, well, what about Brits abroad who live in Spain who don't speak the language? Well, there's not a full equivalence there, and neither is there with other nationalities. If you're going somewhere and you are a massive contributor to an economy, you're not asking for anything back. You're not asking for a translator at the hospital or in the school. You're not even sending your kid necessarily to a school where they would need it. So there's lots of facets to this story, but certainly that headline figure of 1 million people not speaking the language is disturbing, which is why we're asking the question, how crucial is a common language? And the sort of anecdotal evidence, if you like, from our listeners and viewers of people who've experienced this in schools, in the health service in particular. Chloe, stay with us. More from Chloe Dobbs in a couple of moments. Political commentator with us. Lots of stories to get through, including Ed Miliband. Is Ed Miliband going to walk the... Will he be forced to walk the plank? That'll be a revelation. And the Brits, who think women's equality now discriminates against men. What's going on there? Details to come. This is Talk.
She could have turned that into something like the entire world was actually wanting to expect Meghan to do the right thing and pull her head out of her, you know what, and make amends. And at least with her father, you know, this would have been a great opportunity, a special guest on the season premiere, and she can sit there and make her dad one of those rainbow fruit hats or whatever the things. I mean, it looked like a clown's hat, but you know, Dad would have enjoyed that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 1:25. Chloe Dobbs is with us. Here's a story, Chloe. Interesting one. Ed Miliband could lose his job in an up-and-coming cabinet reshuffle over concerns led by Rachel Reeves, apparently of all people, that his net zero plans threaten economic growth. The Energy Secretary has previously claimed that the drive for net zero would actually be a boost to the UK economy. Let's have a listen to Red Ed in full action.
The economics now point in the direction of clean energy. If you think about lots of the decisions that companies and countries are making, they recognise this is the single biggest job creator of our era.
Who recognises that, Chloe, when Ed says that as almost a matter of fact? I'm struggling to find who the people are that believe that.
I mean, this man with his little ukulele lives in absolute delusion. I think that Rachel Reeves, she is realising that it's either going to be him or her that has to walk the plank, so she better push Ed Miliband over the edge, because she is just desperate to deliver growth and do something good for the economy. There were all these promises before the election and it all quickly crumbled when we had that budget, which was originally going to be a budget for growth, and then she said, oh, it's going to be a painful budget. We had all these tax hikes and whatnot, and so she really needs something working in her favour, especially after all of the CV scandals and then this talk of an investigation into her and her previous job for lavish spending. It's really not looking very good for her. So for her to have the weight on her shoulder of a very, very costly net zero agenda of Ed Miliband's is not really good when she's, you know, desperately counting the pennies in the coffers to try and afford all the spending that she needs to make without having to put up taxes more in an unpopular way again. I think that Ed Miliband, as I said, he lives in delusion. I agree with him that we need to have more clean energy in this country, but he's doing stupid things, like apparently he's going to be cementing over the last gas wells in this country.
I mean, why would you do that? Well, you wouldn't need, you'd go, hang on, let's just wait and see. You know, that would be your way of approaching that, right?
I mean, it's just stupid. If we were in a position where we are now ready to be 100% reliant on renewables, absolutely fantastic. Fine, don't need the gas wells anymore. Yep. But we are nowhere near that. It's like a tiny percentage of our energy comes from renewables at the moment. So why are we going to ship them in from abroad when we've got them on our doorstep? It's absolutely bonkers. And when we had the energy bills, when it was announced that they're going to be going up, I think the cap's going up by, I think it's 111 quid a year, he then responds in a media interview saying, oh no, we're going in the right direction because we don't want to be becoming too reliant on Putin for energy and gas and whatnot. And I'm like, how can you say that when you've also just said that you're going to cement over our last gas wells?
Yeah.
Of course, that's going to make us more reliant on people like Putin for gas because we don't yet have enough energy from the renewables yet. I don't know what planet this guy is living on, honestly.
It is quite extraordinary. And as you say, I don't know anybody who doesn't want cleaner energy. Everybody wants cleaner energy. Of course you can. If you can get energy, if you can get it cleaner and you can get it for free as well, just from the wind and the sun, we go, wow, that's like a miracle. Let's bring it on. I'll have some of that. But if your route to getting there is going to take 4 decades and make people bankrupt, then I think you have to really think about the method or your journey into the net zero super dream. Very briefly, 4 in 10 Brits think women's equality now discriminates against men, believing that it's gone too far. I don't know, can you have equality going too far? I mean, that's a contradiction, isn't it? Equality is equality, surely.
Well, it's now gone from equality to positive discrimination, right? So it's now the case you have some companies saying, oh, we're going to have 50% of our board must be women, or you'll even have some job roles are advertised for women only, I think. And this is very problematic. Like, you might have an industry where the vast majority of applicants are men, and there are only a handful of women who have applied, yet they make up 50% of the job roles because of quotas and whatnot. And that is unfair. That's often the case, taking someone who is a poorer quality candidate for the sake of taking a woman, right? And especially if you're not just male, but you're white as well. It's like you've got no hope with job applications these days, because you fill out these applications and they'll ask you, are you gay? What's your gender? What's your ethnicity? And all of this. And if you can't tick any of those boxes, you feel like you've got no chance. You're going to be back of the pile. And I think that it's part of the mental health crisis we see amongst young men, because they feel like they're worthless. They're told that they're evil just for being white and male, and I think that something's got to change. Women's equality, people who have campaigned for it over the years, of course, they've done amazing things, absolutely fantastic, that I can work, I can have a bank account, I can buy a house if I had the money to do so, and all these other things, right? But there are some areas where it's definitely gone too far, so I understand why we've seen these figures in this poll.
The positive discrimination thing is really the story there, I sense. And finally, Meghan Markle's Netflix cookery show With Love Meghan has not had great reviews. It's been slammed as being pointless and bland, with no Oprah or Beckhams. She relied on appearances from minor celebrities and friends. Her estranged brother didn't hold back either, calling it embarrassing, accusing her of making up stories about their childhood. Let's have a listen, though, to Thomas Markle Jr., who spoke to Kevin O'Sullivan on Talk just last night.
Everybody's going to watch the first one, and it's going to be the worst critically acclaimed episode known to. And it's
so
probably
right.
it's not going to make it through there. Then what's going to happen is everybody who watched the first one is going to watch 5 or 6 minutes of the second one and probably go commit themselves to a psychiatric funny farm. Something like that.
Well, that's what the family say. It's not a great review, Chloe.
No, absolutely not. I mean, I haven't seen very much of it. I've only seen a few minutes of little snippets, and I have to say that was enough to absolutely bore me. It's just incredibly dull, and as you say, the A-list celebrities that she wanted to be involved in this, like Oprah, they're not interested because they recognise that Meghan is a very divisive, unpopular figure now, so they probably don't want anything to do with her on camera. And we've had this sort of professional split between her and Harry. He appears in a few shots, but not very many in this series, and I think she had the hopes that she was going to have this big, successful career as a consequence. But look, I don't know how many people have viewed the show already, but I doubt this was a smart financial investment on Netflix's.
But then, of course, what then happens is that whether people talk about it in tones like a brother or stepbrother, whatever it is, that we heard a second ago, or it doesn't matter, because many will now go, oh, I've got to see this to see if it is as bad as some people are saying. So curiously, Netflix could be in a kind of win-win thing, whether it's good or bad, but we'll watch with it. My guess is this will be the last thing she does in some kind of Netflix exclusive. We will see. Chloe, there are more important things to talk about, of course. Thank you, Chloe Dobbs, political commentator. We're talking Ukraine, the Zelensky deal, Ed Miliband potentially walking the plank. Men feel that they're second-class citizens to women when it comes to equality. And that question, how crucial is a common language? You've got Rakib Hassan joining us, the political analyst, in a moment. Always a great voice on these things. He's a voice of common sense. Stand by for that. And, of course, you on the phones as well. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Sue, who says, we live in Spain. We have integrated with our community, learnt functional Spanish. If we need to go to the doctor, dentist or any government office, we have to and expect to communicate in Spanish. For those that cannot do that, they're quite rightly most welcome to bring along a translator at their own expense. No one has an issue with this. We are talking hundreds of millions of pounds in this country. I didn't even mention police stations and the judicial system as well when we were talking about areas where this is a problem. Jim says, I think if you told someone that you can get an interpreter and it'll cost £100, they would soon understand English or know someone who does. I mean, you might think you could, bring a relative along if nothing else. You might think. 25 to 2, this is the story that almost 1 million people in England alone speak little to no English at all, causing concerns over integration. Official stats show that 10% of residents born overseas struggle with our language. The startling figure has fueled demands for stricter integration requirements. Let's get a word with Rakib Hassan, who is, of course, social policy analyst. Rakib, always good to get your views on these things. It's certainly a big number, 1 million people not really completely au fait with the language, and some not speaking it at all.
Well, Ian, it's a failure of our immigration system, and it shows the fact that we really don't have an integration strategy in place for modern Britain. 1 million people either speaking English a little bit or not at all. But if you look at the hotspots, one hotspot is Leicester, which, as you know, has experienced a great deal of immigration in recent times. And that won't be in the 2021 census. Some of those figures might be even worse because of the post-Brexit Boris wave, which has taken place, which has included a large number of migrants from countries such as India. But even in the 2021 census, Spinney Hill Road area in Leicester, 1 in 10 people in that area said they could not speak English at all. 1 in 10. And I think that shows you there's a very clear failure when it comes to integration, especially in a city which has all too often been portrayed as a paragon of British diversity. Yeah,
I mean, these numbers are disturbing. And of course, without trying to sound insensitive to individuals, it's massively expensive as well. In many ways, social cohesion, there's clearly a problem with that. I mean, we pay a price in lots of different ways, but then just the basic coalface of the problem, language translators, kids in schools, NHS integration, the legal system.
Absolutely. I've always made the point that a common shared language is the indispensable glue that ties a nation. Yeah. And that's clearly not what we have.
I was going to say, sorry, your line cut out then, Rakib. You said that's clearly not what we have.
Oh, sorry. That's not what we have at all. And what I really want to see is an immigration system which has English language proficiency at the heart of it, because that enables not just economic integration, but also social integration in your new local community. Yeah. And on top of that, the civic integration in terms of really understanding your new country's culture, heritage and traditions. I think it's very difficult to be able to do that if your level of proficiency when it comes to English language is at a poor level.
And it seems that there isn't really any political appetite to address this. I mean, people like you and I will talk about it. We'll have lots of people calling in with their own stories or experiences where a language barrier in their own country created a problem or there's a genuine issue. This is not about bashing people because they come from somewhere else. This is just a manifestation of having a very loose or completely misguided approach to what immigration should look like.
No, absolutely. And I made this point before that English language proficiency should be very much at the heart of our post-Brexit immigration system. I have to say, though, there are problems with more segregated communities, which may be characterised by lower levels of English language proficiency. I don't think it was entirely helpful that the Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition cut funding for English language classes. But ultimately, I think we'll make the point that we would actually make considerable savings to the welfare state, especially when it comes to spending for translation services, whether it's the NHS or our judicial system. If we had an immigration system which had English language proficiency, and if newcomers went through rigorous assessments which truly tested their proficiency of the English language, both verbal and written.
Well, listen, on that point, Rakib, thank you very much. Rakib Hassan, social, political and policy analyst with us on the programme. This is an interesting one from Jez, who said, I hear these kind of stories quite a lot. My wife is from Thailand. The cost of visas, language tests and life in the UK tests are astronomical. If somebody is here who doesn't speak English, then as far as I'm concerned, deport them. The point I was getting about hearing this a lot, I mean, Jez makes that, but whenever anybody does it legitimately, if you like, or from a country or comes with nothing but an intention to integrate, they seem to be the people that are most penalised, whether it's about language or something else. You know, Australians, Canadians, some Americans trying to get to the UK because they've had the audacity to fall in love with somebody of a different nationality, jumping through absolute hoops and hurdles to be able to remain, even though they're married, not some sham marriage, genuine marriage, and cannot for the life of them find a way in without having to go through incredibly expensive, laborious, almost demeaning hurdles of bureaucracy and form filling, and there's an astronomical cost that is also attached to that as well. And I only ever really hear that when it comes to legitimate people who have a very good reason to be here and want to come here and contribute and work, and they're married and they might even have kids as well, and still can't find a way in. Matthew says it's absolutely ridiculous that we have so many people in this country who cannot speak English. I once lived in New Zealand. My wife, who is a nurse, when she moved from the UK to New Zealand, she had to sit an English test. She's English born and bred Anglo-Saxon. Why is our country so weak and pathetic on immigration matters? It's a very good point. Alison in Glasgow, translation services should not be free in any public sector setting. If you need a translator, you bring your own. Plenty of free translation available on phones now, says Alison. And the trouble, I suppose, yeah, and that's very true. And that to me is one area where you think, really? You've got to speak, you don't pay for the translator to be there? I mean, that's extraordinary. That's just free. I mean, nobody would expect. I don't even think the people that get the translator always expect. I mean, some will go, oh, it doesn't matter, I don't have to learn the language. They'll just send the council office. There's another area, the council offices, dealing with your local authority. The Department of Work and Pensions in 5 years have spent 30 million quid on translators. One department for one little nugget of time. Let's go to Mark in Lincolnshire. What are your thoughts, Mark? Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Hi.
Hi there, mate. Yeah, basically, my quick thoughts on this are, and I've said this in the past, immigration, no, we don't all accept that we need some level of immigration. Immigration, going back 20, 30 years, yes, it was absolutely fine. When you're talking anywhere from 10 to 50,000 in a single year, that's manageable. Because what you're doing there is you're getting people that don't naturally speak English, probably do anyway, or they've learned it, or they learn it quick when they come here, because they're coming here for a specific reason, which are higher skilled jobs. They may be working in the health service, this kind of thing. So there was much more of a requirement for them to have it anyway, and it was kind of an expected thing. Whereas now, when you're opening the doors and you're allowing up, about 1 million a year, that's no longer a requirement.
Yeah.
And as equally as I've said in the past, what we've created, which is why I hate what they've done to us over the last 10, 15 years, is that they've created these ethnic silos, which you've got these entire towns now pretty much in some places of this country that are majority non-white British, they're non-Indigenous people in the majority. So you then have a situation where people that then come, that are on the lower end of the economic scale, perhaps even just going straight to benefits. So I'm talking about people, family members, this kind of thing, that are coming in. They're not going to be working. They have no real intention to work when they come here. And they have no requirement to learn English because the community that they're living in is so vastly them, their culture, why would you bother learning English? They don't have to.
Yeah, there's no reason to. But I think the price we pay is not just the financial price, is it?
No, well, it absolutely isn't. You know, it creates a lot of issues when they inevitably will have to interact with, you know, either native people or other people that are not their culture, you know, that might have come from other parts of the world that have learned English. And, you know, you have that common language within the country, which is, you know, obviously as an indigenous citizen of this country, it's kind of a requirement. I kind of expected there's a bit of respect myself anyway. If you're not going to learn my language but want to live here to reap the benefits of living here, well, I'm not being funny, but you're going to put my back up, aren't you?
Yeah, and I think
you're
that's
not making any effort.
Yeah, that's the problem. If people are not in any way contributing.
Well, yeah, it is. I mean, the other side of it as well, Ian, for me anyway, at least, is for well over a decade, governments are using immigration, you know, suckling on the teat of immigration, instead of actually fixing the problems in the country. If you stop immigration, which is what I'd like to see, you know, we can have another discussion about who needs to be deported or not, because I have strong views on that. But if you just stop immigration right now, this is kind of what has to be done, because otherwise you're going to continue to have an ever-increasing amount of, you know, people in the country that are economically inactive, because all the government does is, oh, well, we haven't got people to pick fruit in the fields. We haven't got people to work as nurses. We haven't got carers. So what we'll do is we'll import even more of those, unaware, well, completely aware, actually, because they're not stupid. I refuse to believe this notion that they're idiots. They're not. They're fully aware of what they're doing. Yeah. Because what they're actually doing is they're creating an even bigger problem, because what you see is, you know, you get one person in. I can't remember who it was. That was Mike Graham's show this morning. And he was talking to somebody on there. And it's the exact problem that we have. And that is, to fill 3 job roles, they then bring their family over here. And you end up with 21 people, because there was, I think, 3 people they mentioned in particular, not names or anything. But they mentioned 3 people doing 3 different job roles. Yeah. Each of them has 5 family members that end up coming here. Yep. So then you have 20-odd people, you know.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. And even if people are really nice, and the difficulty with this conversation is that somebody half hears it and they go, oh, like, this sounds a bit suspicious, you know, talking about foreigners, and, you know, it's a little bit racist. And of course it's not. I mean, this is a genuine conversation. There are areas of this country where you think, hang on, it's a bit weird that somebody's come over from Bangladesh, for example, and they live here, their mum lives here, 5 of their uncles live here, 7 of their aunts live here, and 17 cousins. How would that happen? In what scenario would that unfold? Is that just a coincidence? They all applied at the same time? You're absolutely right. We should be able to have these big conversations. Mark, thank you very much indeed for that. This comes in from Paul, who says, I'm a former police officer in Scotland. Many years ago, I worked in the Special Branch and Nationality Department, which had a responsibility for naturalisation inquiries, which was basically interviewing people who were applying for British citizenship. Many of them were the Chinese community, but applied to every other nationality as well. Part of that process was a home visit, which would take 4 hours on average. I would ask numerous questions, all of which were designed to establish if the person had made any attempt to integrate into the community or to gain knowledge and understanding of our culture and our history. In addition, I would evaluate their command of English and what employment or future employment they would achieve. This was a strict process. Sadly, none of this happens now. Once you have LTR, leave to remain, you are here for life. Yeah, that's kind of it, really, with no questions asked. Isn't that interesting? It's also interesting, I didn't realise that a certain branch of the police dealt with some of that. 0344 499 1000 is where you will find us. Your example stories, anecdotes, and the wider question on how crucial a common language is, whether it's in a health setting, if you found yourself up against something, in education, in the law and justice, department, work and pension, your local council, wherever it happens to be. We're also throwing out, naturally, the question of Trump, J.D. Vance, that big Congress speech yesterday. Peace in Ukraine. Do we shake Trump's hand, or has he got a deal that will not, at the end of the day, be the most favourable to Ukraine and the Ukrainian people? Your response on that as well. 0344 499 1000.
Why does it seem to be Caribbean islands you seem to be visiting? You know, where are the trips to Slovakia or Belgium? You know, or some places where they don't have golden beaches. Yeah. I'm sure we could learn from the parliamentary democracies of places that don't have round-the-clock sunshine. Parliament in Britain, and it's quite right, decides the law of our country. It's why some of us voted for Brexit. But it does, of course, I think, mean that the Speaker isn't really accountable to anyone, apart from MPs. And if MPs don't sort of start looking at how he conducts himself, then who will?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This from Jeff. My wife worked in the NHS. Part of the job was booking appointments for surgery. She had, if required by the patient, to book a translator on many occasions, and the patient didn't turn up, but the translator would still need to get paid. I can imagine. How do you not get a bill for that, for God's sake? This one in from Caroline. Regarding speaking English, I'm Scottish and well-spoken. When I worked recently in London, non-native people consistently said they couldn't understand me. I don't know what I was saying, didn't think I was speaking English. They didn't say it was my accent. They thought I couldn't speak English. I found this very personally insulting coming from many non-native English speakers. They thought nothing of saying they didn't understand me and questioned if I spoke English. The fact is that theirs was not good enough to understand a well-spoken Scottish accent. That's extraordinary, Caroline. Thank you for that. That's a great example of where you can see how broken the system is. Loads to get through. Let's talk about Ed Miliband as well. David is down in London. David, what have you got for us?
Hi, Ian. Yeah, you're saying that, he was saying that it's going to create jobs. But
Net zero is going to create jobs. More jobs than you can ever imagine. You have jobs coming out of our ears.
Yeah, but Ian, creating jobs is a cost. It's not a benefit. And also, renewables are absolutely not free. They're extremely expensive, far more expensive than gas, and they also require constant maintenance, which increases. It becomes more expensive, the maintenance, as they age. And also, Ian, the turbines become less efficient as they age, and you have to replace them after 15 years. And they're also extremely damaging to the environment, both turbines and solar panels.
When you say damaging, you mean because you have to dig up a field to put them in, or something more than that?
That as well, but also they kill birds, bats and insects, and solar panels, they leak cadmium and lead into the soil. And also the wind turbines, they create infrasound and wind shadows, which are extremely stressful for people living near them, and also animals that live near them.
Is that, I mean, you could explain, I suppose, I'm not defending anything here, by the way, but I suppose you could argue that with, building something, building a housing estate would have that effect, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but gas is much more expensive, and all of these renewable energy, Ian, 100% of it has to be backed up by gas. That's the thing. It's like having two energy supplies. You're paying for two, but you're only using one because the gas supply has to be in backup when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine.
Well, if the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, we don't get anything from the renewables, do we?
And then it has to be backed up by gas. That's why we've still got power.
Yeah, but according to Ed Miliband, once you get it all up and running and it's storing it nicely, then life will be tickety-boo, David.
I don't know what he's talking about.
Well, I'm prepared completely to believe that. David, thank you. David in London. There's another David in Pembrokeshire on Ukraine and Trump. David, what have you got for us? Hello.
Hi, how are you? All right?
Good, thanks.
Yeah, it's just about Zelensky's meeting with Trump and cronies the other day. I mean, he didn't have a chance in hell because what he was talking to were three little kids, because that's what a narcissist is. They are mentally and psychologically at the age of anything from 3 to 9.
When you say three, you're talking about Trump and J.D. Vance?
J.D. Vance and Musk.
Oh, and Musk as well. OK, I don't think he was there, was he, Musk?
Well, yeah, he wasn't there. Well, Vance and
Trump. OK.
They have a psychological mental age of 3 to 9. 9 is the highest.
What do you base that on, David? I mean, is that your own because you don't like them, so that's your assessment?
No, I researched narcissism because I was affected by narcissism for many years. So I researched it and to see why was I treated like this. So there's the World Health Organization on mental health. I've researched into that, and that's what they say.
So, so you've been on the receiving end of in a narcissistic relationship, as it were.
Yes. So, and
some would argue that quite a lot of politicians are psychopaths, and I don't use that as a pejorative. It doesn't mean they're a mass murderer. They have the same kind of neurological, psychological makeup in terms of lacking empathy, getting things done, narcissism, that kind of stuff. Some would say that probably most politicians are a bit like that.
Well, yeah, I think because their goal is to be admired, self-entitlement, to get to the top, which is a good thing, don't get me wrong. But the way they do it, they have no
reading Zelensky the Riot Act, which I suppose we could fairly say that's kind of what it was, because he was, I think, sort of to paraphrase them, he wasn't getting it, he wasn't understanding how perilous this was and how little influence he had over these decisions. That was wrong, or the way they did it was wrong?
Well, the point is, Zelensky was trying to get some words in, and these were shutting him down. This was well rehearsed by the two of them. I'm sure of it, because you're getting away from what I'm saying is he's a dangerous man and Vance, because they have no boundaries, in the sense that they will, by that expression, which the World Health Organization says, define narcissism, no boundaries in capital letters.
Well, listen, I agree with I think the last point about boundaries. I mean, boundaries ordinarily in politics would be opposition and opposition parties and voices, but at the moment in the States there is no opposition. Now, no democracy can function authentically and correctly without the checks and balances of a good opposition. It's as crucial as to who the government of the day is. You have to have that there. Now, you might love the bones of whoever's in power, whether it's a lefty or a righty. In this case, we're talking about Trump. But you've got to have buffer zones. You've got to have people out there to call somebody out or test, like you would in a court case, to test the evidence or how good a policy or a suggestion might be. And that's what America is absolutely lacking. And I think most people, no matter who they are politically, would agree with that. More from you on the way. Lines are open. Let's get the news headlines at 2 o'clock.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back. It is the home of common sense. Coming up on 3 minutes after 2 o'clock, Donald Trump says he will work tirelessly to end the Ukraine war after he got that, quote, positive letter from President Zelensky and strong signals from Russia that they're ready for a bit of peace. I bet they are. We'll have more on that throughout the course of the show, taking your calls on that, of course. Almost this afternoon, almost 1 million people in England speak little to no English, with official figures showing that 10% of foreign-born residents struggle with the language. This has naturally fueled demands for stricter integration requirements. But what does that even look like? And what have been your experiences in health or education, law and order, with the language problem? And court delays are actively harming victims, with their trials postponed up to 6 times at the last minute. This is according to the Victims Commissioner. And there are, in some extreme cases, and all ears if you've experienced this, it could be years before you get your day in court. And if you're the victim, that is a real unacceptable situation. We'll have more on that as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. This one from Jez says, I used to live and work in Japan. I had to learn to talk, read and write Japanese to fill out forms to get a bank account and find a place to live. I did get assisted by friends, but you can't get by without knowing how to speak and read Japanese. That's a big old ask, isn't it? Because any language that doesn't even use the same letters or letters at all, you would look at and go, wow, where do I even begin on this one? That's a proper journey. Fair play for doing it. Kevin Schofield has joined us. We didn't ask him to. He just walked in to get a cup of tea. So we thought, well, while you're here, Kevin, you might as well pop in. Political editor at HuffPost UK. Hot-footing it from Parliament, of course, PMQs, where it was apparently, I didn't catch it today, even though it was on the screens outside, but apparently fairly amicable stuff.
Yeah, the I wouldn't call it a clash. The exchanges between Kemi Badenoch and Keir Starmer were, by and large, pretty consensual. She was asking just about Ukraine, just for an update, really, on where we are in terms of relations, obviously, with the US, how the peace plan's looking, all that type of thing. We didn't really learn anything that we hadn't already known. He gave a statement to Parliament on Monday. In actual fact, the most interesting, the most newsworthy bit came before Kemi Badenoch even asked a question, right at the very top. Keir Starmer, quite unusually these days, referred to the anniversary. It was the 13th anniversary of 6 young men being killed by an explosive device in Afghanistan. Yeah. And also the 13th anniversary today of a young man, Royal Marine, being killed in Helmand Province. Now, reading between the lines, it was very obvious this was a dig at JD Vance after what JD Vance said yesterday. Now, JD Vance obviously, as we know, came out and tried to clarify and say he wasn't talking about Britain and France when he was having a go at nations that hadn't fought a war in 30 or 40 years, but he didn't say who he was talking about. And it's pretty clear that Keir Starmer thinks he was talking about Britain, and he basically paid tribute to the bravery and courage of British troops. So that was the main newsworthy, a slight dig back at JD Vance. It's funny because we mentioned the JD Vance thing yesterday, and I got, we read out the story that JD Vance has been accused of disrespecting British inclusion in wars and those that fought for it. And I said in the piece, look, he said that isn't what he was referring to. We showed up the apology on screen. But of course, on social media, people don't bother to watch the whole clip. They just see the beginning. So I got a right old pile on and had to reply to people saying, well, we did say that he didn't say this. However, you're right. I don't think he was specifically talking about the UK. I think he just said it as a general kind of comment. Yeah. But as a vice president, he shouldn't have said that as a general comment, knowing full well that that list includes us, and knowing that the only 2 countries that had put themselves up to be peacekeeping, if you like, in Ukraine was Britain and France. So, well, absolutely. So it was a clumsy thing for him to say. I don't think he was specifically saying, oh yeah, the Brits, some random place. I don't think it was as blunt as that, but it's easy to understand why some people have translated it like that, even though he's clarified that he didn't mean that. He perhaps shouldn't have
gone that way in the first place.
Yeah, well, he's failed to say who he was talking about. He obviously had someone or some countries in mind. It was the fact he mentioned as well 20,000 troops, when that's roughly the figure that's been bandied around of Britain and France having to put in. So again, that was why people were saying, well, who else could he possibly have been talking about? And when he put out his clarification yesterday, lots of people then asked, fine, well, who were you talking about then? And there's been silence from JD Vance since then. So clearly Keir Starmer believes that that's who he was talking about. But Kemi Badenoch, she actually broke ranks with her own Shadow Defence Secretary, James Cartledge, who also criticised JD Vance. She came out yesterday and said that she believes JD Vance, who she's obviously friendly with. And today, after PMQs, her spokesman as well said, look, she takes him at his word. She doesn't think that that's who he was talking
She kind of knows him a bit, doesn't she?
Yeah, they go back a little bit. She's visited him in America, so they do have a friendship there. So it put her in a bit of an awkward spot. She didn't want to be obviously criticising her friend, but at the same time it did also put her at odds with her own defence spokesman.
Yeah, I wonder whether he was... he might not have meant the UK, but I heard somebody describe it like this. It might not have meant the UK, but it amounts to that. That's the implication, and it's a reasonable implication, regardless of whether that's what he specifically meant.
I think it is, and
that I think is not an unreasonable analysis.
Yeah, because we just don't know this coalition of the willing that Keir Starmer's talked about. We just don't know who else is in it. That hasn't been revealed unless there's talk behind the scenes that JD Vance is aware of that obviously we don't. Then he might have some other countries in mind, but it would have been useful if he'd come out and said. But then it makes it difficult. Then he's slagging off some other countries.
Well, yes, not the UK. Okay, so was it France then?
Yeah,
and then
so
the French will go, "What are you talking about, Mr. Vance?"
Well, quite. So he'd have been better
in that specific accent.
In that accent, yeah, sort of German, weirdly.
German, yes.
But no, but he shouldn't have said it in the first place. It's not diplomatic to be criticising.
Well, that's the point, isn't
other
it?
Nations.
And you see, the defence. It's fascinating. Yesterday, so one of the people that tweeted me on it said, "Collins, I hope you're lawyered up for this." Firstly, I didn't say it, but secondly, lawyered up. What, I've got to get JD Vance is going to sue me.
Surely
this has been spoken at. Even Fox News were questioning who he meant, for God's sake, so it's not exactly something that is exclusive to me or this. But I did get a few people, reply back and say, "Oh, thanks for clarifying. I didn't watch the whole video."
Yeah.
But again, Vance has sort of taken on this Trumpian position where people who like the cut of his jib kind of take real ownership of him. It's almost the sporting, as if you're following a football team, that you won't have anything bad said against them. And I think it's fascinating that. I used to find it fascinating when Trump was in the first time around. Find it fascinating with Jeremy Corbyn. People who love Jeremy Corbyn have that same,
used to be the
Nicola Sturgeon, that same sort of messianic worship. If you said to half of these people, just so JD Vance, who did he used to represent? Which state? They wouldn't have a clue.
No, absolutely.
Which part? Have you read his book? No, haven't read his book. Which element of the military did he serve in? Wouldn't know. Wouldn't have a clue.
No.
Didn't know anything about his backstory at all. Just sounds like a bloke who makes me feel like I like him.
He's on my team.
He's on my team.
I support the team that he's a member of.
Exactly.
So therefore,
I don't want to look at any politician like that.
No,
and I was saying just before the news, completely. You need, and you know this, Kevin, because you've been around the political bloc and in Westminster since the 1930s. So you would be able to do the old age joke. Always never ages, really, does it?
Unlike me.
But if you get a good government, you need good opposition, right?
Absolutely,
it's crucial to
100%.
democracy. And in America at the moment, there is no real opposition. You saw that kind of, in Congress, a few people shouting out. I mean, they look like disgruntled students, didn't
little handwritten notes.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, you're right.
Boo, we don't like you, Donald. It's
this is not normal, said one of them.
That's right.
They just look very impotent,
you
which
need,
is what they are.
To have good democracy, you need top-notch opposition.
Yeah.
And people need to be held to account, even if you agree with the policy. It's got to be tested. You don't want, a first world democracy just railroading through decisions because a couple of blokes felt like it.
No,
I mean, that's not democracy.
Absolutely. No,
that's what happens in China and North Korea.
No, quite. And so I think people need to have a healthy scepticism of their political leaders because, you get a chance every 4 or 5 years to vote them out. And, you know, they should run on their record. And if they don't do what they've said they're going to do, or if they leave the country in a mess, then they should be punished. But they shouldn't be given a pass just because you like them more than the other lot.
Well, a greater example, I suppose, of that kind of confirmation bias or, you know, people taking ownership. So Julia Hartley-Brewer, of course, you've known Julia for a while, of this parish. She's been off today. She's got a dicky throat. I'm sure it's all the shouting she did. She's got real reservations about Trump's position on all of this. Now, for many people, that might expect Julia to have the very opposite view to that, but she hasn't. Here's how it's, to me, you need a psychologist on this, I guess. So she gave 5 reasons why she thinks Trump is bang on. She thinks he's right on Israel, DEI, gender madness, wastage in government. But if you give one reservation, the team supporters are having none of it.
It's bizarre.
It's like, now hang on. So 9 things out of 10 I agree with him on, 1 thing I don't. That's enough to make it. So she's now being called a lefty. I mean, Julia Hartley-Brewer is being called a lefty.
I've always known it.
A warmongerer. It's like,
always been there.
Really, it's underneath it all.
Scratch the surface. You know.
Scratch the surface. And she's got a Jeremy Corbyn tattoo on her arm, which she said, no, it's not Corbyn, it's just an uncle I really liked. But yeah, I mean, that's the weird world we live in.
It is. They want complete devotion. The way I look at it is it means more criticism coming from Julia Hartley-Brewer, who supports Trump and, as you say, supports lots of his other policies. It actually should make you think, well, hang on a minute, if even a Trump supporter doesn't agree with it, maybe it makes you should have a think about it, rather than say, oh, you know,
so that makes you a lefty.
Ridiculous. Just dismiss
it used to happen. I would say on air that I didn't like Donald Trump very much, and someone would say, what, Biden fan, are you? It's like, no, how does that work?
No, it's not.
Be a Ron DeSantis fan.
No, the world is not
Mitt
black
Romney
and white.
fan.
The world is not black and white.
Exactly,
you know,
a Reagan fan. I know he's long gone, but you kind of take the point.
Absolutely, it is really bizarre, and I think social media has got a lot to do with it. I mean, I don't remember, going back to the 1930s, I don't remember politicians in this country, in Western liberal democracies, politicians inspiring such devotion from their followers, you know, but it's almost like cult-like at times. It's quite weird.
It is, we are living in very strange times. I mean, in terms of Ukraine, I suppose you have to, and I said this, you know, house points to Trump because he's put this on the table. You know, this would be, you know, if Kamala Harris had been elected in, it would have been a continuation. Nobody would be talking about it. No. Europe wouldn't have said a word. I mean, they've been horrendously quiet over the last 3 years. You've not heard such animated voices. I mean, bearing in mind this is a country that is in Europe, you might think that, you know, there'd be a lot. Ursula von der Leyen would be given a daily press conference on it, but nothing.
No, sometimes you do need someone who come along who's a disruptor, who just knocks heads together and says, look, it's not been working up until now. I don't care about the status quo. We need to do something about it. Now, you might not agree with what they're doing, but at least you're right. We are talking peace. The question is what type of peace. In the final analysis. However, the fact that we're at least talking about peace and talking about ceasefires and month-long truces or whatever is a good thing.
Let's move on to this story. Far calmer waters, well, sort of. Rachel Reeves saying she'll slash public spending to hit higher defence targets. She suggested not tax hikes will fund it, but public spending to reach that 2.5% of GDP by 2027. Defence spending could rise to 3% in the next Parliament, costing 14 billion annually at current prices. So I don't know whether this is political or whether they, you know, sniff the genuine military need.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously they announced last week that they were going to raid the foreign aid budget in order to pay for the up to 2.5. It's the fact as well that they've promised that their aim is to hit 3% by the next Parliament. Now, a lot of people are saying 3% won't be enough in the new world. The problem she's got, though, is that they completely have boxed themselves in. She's got these fiscal rules, these very tight fiscal rules, which she mustn't break in terms of borrowing, and leaving herself a buffer of money left over, although that appears to have been spent long ago. And the fact in the election they said they weren't going to put up tax, or certainly not interest, certainly not income tax, VAT, or national insurance on employers, on employees. So it's they're in a bit of a bind here. The only thing left is to cut. But the problem there is she did say when in opposition, no return to austerity under Labour, so it's quite difficult to.
But it's also,
square that
how do you
circle.
define austerity as well? I mean, austerity could be seen as, if a government is, making savings. I mean, to some people, they go, that's austerity. Austerity isn't always a bad word. Austerity could be a very positive word if you are being prudent. Gordon Brown word, of course. Prudent with the, with the public coffers.
Well, absolutely. So that's what the Treasury would say. No, it's not. It can't be austerity because we've massively boosted spending on an NHS. We're spending more money over here. We're just having to cut here in order to balance the books. So, but no doubt those on the left will say, well, this is austerity.
Austerity. They love that word. I remember, from 2010 when... And here's an interesting little thing that everybody seems to forget, Kevin. Do you remember, just prior to 2010, it was the first time we'd seen leaders' debates. We had Nick Clegg, Gordon Brown, David Cameron battling it out. What was fascinating back then is that they were jumping over each other to talk about who would have the most robust austerity, because obviously we'd come out the 2008 financial crash. And every one of them, Nick Clegg included, we will have to make some serious decisions. It's not going to be pretty. The Guardian, I remember doing a poll saying, most of the public back austerity. As it turned out, it became a coalition. They implemented some austerity and the world lost its mind. And, even before they put any austerity measures in, people were talking about, life's terrible in Britain because of austerity. It's like, no, it hasn't started yet. It hasn't begun yet.
Wait.
And now people are still talking about it, even though it stopped 6 years ago, as it were. So I think to accuse any government just because they cut something as a programme of austerity would be wrong.
Well, no, absolutely. But the problem is there, obviously, it's Rachel Reeves who raised austerity by saying... I remember being at a party conference, I think the last one before the election, saying no return to austerity under Labour. So if you say that, and then you start implementing cuts, then don't be surprised if people start accusing you of being a bit of a hypocrite.
Absolutely. I was just trying to find the piece. I always, always keep the receipts, Kev, but I remember, I'm going to try and find it when she wrote this, but I think it was just after the coalition came in, she essentially wrote a piece, or there was a piece she was featured in, The Guardian, Labour will be tougher than the Tories on benefits, vows Rachel Reeves. She wrote that in...
When was that?
2013.
2013. Well, there you go.
So there you go.
Gave her 12 years on, and it's still the same message. It's
exactly.
And every government says we're going to cut welfare. That is where... And to be fair, the coalition did do that. There was an awful lot of controversy over it at the time.
Spot on.
It'll be very difficult, though, for Labour, a Labour government... to do it, and it is easier said than done, without a doubt.
Spot on. Final one here. Rishi Sunak says he regrets using "Stop the Boats" migrant slogan.
I bet he does.
But still thinks he was right to call an early election, despite what happened. So this was him. I think he was talking on a podcast, wasn't he, or something?
Yeah, he was on Nick Robinson's podcast.
Yeah.
And he was his first sit-down interview, I think, since...
I was wondering that, first...
But, I mean, I'm sure he does regret it, but,
he says it was too stark and poorly communicated.
Well,
unachievable, I would
Well, and he's got to carry the can for that. That was everyone said it at the time, really, you're going to stop the boat by when? By the end of this year? By the election? And it was almost as if they announced it and then thought, oh my God, what the hell have we done?
And then every time he spoke, it was in front of him, wasn't it? Written under the kind of podium thing. Stop the boats.
Well, I saw it again and again and again, and they repeated it and repeated it. It became their slogan. So he can't really complain.
He would go up to the podium on an immigration speech the day they just announced 1,000 people had crossed the channel with a big sign saying "Stop the boat." It's like, is this satire or is this? So it was always a clunky one. It was always a massive risk.
It was a massive risk, but it shows you that sometimes it's. If you're looking for simplistic answers to complicated problems, then that's a bit of a red flag, really, I think.
Smash the Gangs is the new one, of course.
Oh, that's another one.
That's Keir.
But then we've seen in the last 3 days there's been 1,000 have come over.
I don't know which gangs have been smashed. I mean,
it's fine saying that in election campaigns, although the problem was Rishi Sunak said it while in government, and it was being held to account from day one of doing it.
The trouble with the Keir gang thing, I mean, the gangs that facilitate this, it's already a criminal offence. You've got governments of any country and police forces in any country, certainly in Northern Europe in particular, looking for people who are doing bad stuff. There's nothing, catching one and saying, oh, look, we've smashed a gang. Doesn't really cut it.
No, especially when another gang just pops up further along,
like the air bubble,
the coastline. I mean, it's just the way it goes. There is a demand, and these gangs form to meet that demand. It's how you deal with the demand, how you stop the demand in the first place. And again, that's Rishi Sunak didn't do it. thus far, Keir Starmer hasn't done it either.
Indeed. It's 2:20, and it's nearly your bedtime, Kevin, just to continue
when you
that.
get to my age. Jeez, oh.
I don't know where this suddenly came from today. The sprightly, I should say, Kevin Schofield. Good to have you with us, Kevin.
Cheers, Ian.
Political editor at HuffPost UK with us on the programme. Over to you, 0344 499 1000.
Where are you on all of this? Because it's really polarising.
So even Zelensky's best friends, of which the British government is one of them, lots of European governments, and he's got a lot of defenders in Washington who like the guy. They think he is a hero. He is, he didn't flee. He could have been. He could be in the south of France by now. Of course he could. He could have got out of there quick as a flash. Instead, he said, "I don't need a ride. I don't need ammo." He has put in a stalwart performance since February 2022. Even his best friends say that he overcooked it on Friday.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This one on the equality story, that equality has gone too far, say some men and some women as well, for that matter. Gal in Rotherham says, reference women and the men equality. I don't think by now we should have some, I do think by now we should have some laws in place to address this. No way should men and women doing the same job be paid different hourly rates. Well, they're not allowed to be. That would be completely illegal. The Fair Pay Act, or whatever it was called, Equal Pay Act, came in yonks ago. But there are some jobs where you can negotiate your own rate, I suppose. Maybe that's the area. Gal says, I can't work out how this works with minimum wage rates either. I had no idea there were two minimum wage rates, one for men and a lower one for women. There isn't. There really isn't. I don't know where that came from. This needs addressing. Do Parliament know about this? And I'm appalled that pension companies can get away with paying a different rate of return to women. That's just wrong. I mean, how do markets even know what sex owns the shares? This is incredible in 2025. This is going to go on. Don't get me started on the barriers to women for doing jobs like bin collection or bricklaying or roof tiling. I've always said it should be legal for women to do these jobs. It's time to wake up and get laws passed. I don't know whether Gal was being kind of joking at the beginning bit there, but there's definitely not. There is two minimum wages, isn't there? It's an age thing, though. But the last point is really interesting. I've never seen an animated, fired-up feminist on Newsnight or something like that wanging on about why we need more female road workers or on the bins, ever. I hear talks about the boardroom or any job that seems to have a six-figured salary attached to it, but never Like, what about working in plumbing? What about bricklaying, roofing, as Gal references there? You never hear that. No one is advocating for that. The opportunities are there. Nobody ever argues that point. I mentioned this about bin men. I've only met one bin woman in my life. But I've never seen a bin woman. Of course they exist. You can apply for the job, you can do the job, you get the job, right? I understand that. For whatever reason. I just sense that you're never going to get, like, blokes as a 50% proportion apply for a job in a nail bar, and you're not going to get many women apply for jobs on the bins or laying tarmac, for goodness sake. I know there's clear strength issues in some of those jobs, which would be a factor, I guess. This is Ava in Kent on migration. Ava, what are your thoughts? Good afternoon to you.
Hi. You.
What are your thoughts?
Good. Because we're living in the rural province of the UK.
I think we're going to have to try and get you back, Ava, on another line, because your line's a little bit dodgy. I want to hear what you've got to say. Let me do a comment here from Alan in Notts, who says English language issue. Google Translate or similar could be a short-term solution, whilst the immigration and social cohesion issue is addressed. We were talking about this in the office earlier. I know people have mixed results with Google Translate, but yes, it does exist in a fairly impressive form these days. David says the lady in Spain is absolutely correct. We lived in Portugal and always had to pay for any interpreter we needed whenever talking to officials. And this one from Trevor says women are massively underrepresented in the army on the front line of most wars. Will we see this change? I'm surprised the woke mob can't see the problems they're creating for the future in a massive backlash. That's because, thank you, Trevor, for that. It's because the woke mob won't really reckon. I mean, they'll talk about it if you ask them. Yeah, of course there should be more women in the armed forces, but they won't go big on it. They won't go, they want more women in public-facing jobs. And that's great as well. No doubt about that. No one's disputing. You'd have to be some kind of supercharged moron to say, well, you can't do that job. You're who gives a hoot whether you're male or female, for God's sake? It's 2025. But you do have to question why some people gravitate to some jobs and why those that are advocating full equality only seem to specify certain, what you might call the good jobs, rather than the jobs there's a little bit of labour involved, bit of manual graft maybe. Ava is back with us. Ava, how are you doing?
Hi, Ian. Sorry about that. I live in a rural sort of area.
Yeah.
So the reception is not great.
Okay, that's all right. You're sounding fine now, which is good.
Okay, great. I think you might be able to hear that I'm South African, actually Zimbabwean South African.
Okay.
I phoned you guys before. But on your topic of this whole English test, okay, now just bear with me. I started as a teaching assistant at a secondary school. Basically graduated, in inverted commas, to an English teacher of both post-16 and years 7 to 11 because I had 5.5 A-levels. But I didn't have a degree, okay? So I taught for probably about 7 years as an English teacher. And then, of course, up comes our indefinite leave to remain. So we went to Trinity College in London. We paid $150 per person, family of 4, for the English test, which your previous guest said only lasts like a certain amount of time. The person that actually took us that day just laughed at us. She said, look, I'm giving you an A+++. I said, listen, I've got 5.5 A-levels from Cambridge University. So
can I just ask, so what's a half an A-level out of interest?
I did an M-level. So
all right, okay, I got you. All right.
An A.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought you meant you answered half the questions in some test at some point.
Yeah,
right.
I've got language, I've got literature, and I've got the M-level English. She actually laughed. She said, this is the most ridiculous thing she's ever seen. I said, yeah, I'm teaching in a secondary school because they're so desperate for English teachers. They do not even have English teachers that know how to speak properly. And she said, yeah, how can you explain that? I said, they can't spell. They don't understand syntax. Their grammar is off. I said, I mean, I don't even know what colloquial means versus, slang. I said, they are not actually educated in A-level literature. They've only got their O-levels. He went, oh, my goodness. I said, yes. But I have to go before the Home Office and supply them with this Trinity College certificate stating that I can actually speak.
Wow. So despite your exams, your extensive abilities, teaching and goodness knows what else, you're being put through the ringer. But there's a whole cohort of other people elsewhere that I mentioned this before, you know, former Commonwealth countries, current Commonwealth countries, countries that are similar to us, whether it's South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, America. People from those countries seem to have all the problems with the immigration. The very people that we want to be here have the trouble. Go on.
Yeah, okay, because South Africa did not distinguish English as the first language.
Okay.
All right, so as a result of that, because there's 9 to 11 languages later, even though you're English speaking, it says so on your South African passport and identity documents, you have to still do that Trinity test unless you have an English degree that states otherwise.
There it is. Listen, Ava, thank you very much indeed. Good luck with it all. 5.5 A-levels or not. That does seem an extraordinary... And it's expensive as well, as I was saying previously. And that's somebody doing it through, you know, the legitimate route and being forced... I've seen this with mates who've come, particularly Australian and New Zealand mates, who really struggled on that kind of... You think, the very people you want to come who are going to work and add and contribute have the greatest problem convincing... It's like talking to a brick wall at some point. You hear some of the stories from people who have had interviews with Home Office officials, whether they've been online, and it's almost as if they've snuck into the country under a lorry, you know, to answer these questions. It's like, no, I'm legit, I speak the language, I'm paying my own work, I'm taking zero out of the country, I'm adding to things, I'm paying taxes. Oh, not good enough, sir. You know, can you tell us the method of entry to the country? The method of coming a flipping aeroplane, you half-wit. How else do you think I got here? 0344 499 1000. If you come from New Zealand, you can actually come through a tunnel, which most people are not even aware of exists. A long old journey. It'll take you weeks, but can be done. Our lines are open. More from you on the way. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Talk. Sam says, I'm in North Dorset and I've seen a woman on a bin lorry. We have an excellent reputation, a female electrician, and I spotted a woman on some roadworks too. So they are out there. Yes, we used to have a sparky electrician, a female electrician used to come to our house. And yeah, nobody, and you see vans every now and again. that don't have, you know, such and such and son, they have such and daughter. Yeah, I mean, there are plenty of examples, but en masse, as a proportion, you probably still wouldn't find many women doing those jobs. I mean, painting and decorating. I mean, there's a job that you wouldn't have thought. I mean, bricklaying, you could say, well, there's a kind of strength component to it that might be certainly would be a factor. So that would maybe answer that. But, you know, painting, decorating, surely that would be something that, I mean, bearing in mind, kids at a young age, girls are better at colouring than men. So just to extend that, does that mean they're better painter and decorators than men? Quite possibly. Let's move to more serious matters. The Justice Secretary has admitted the government's announcement today of more funding for judges to tackle the unprecedented backlog of criminal cases, that it will only touch the surface. Currently, there are 73,000 unresolved prosecutions in England and Wales. Let me just give you that number again. 73,000 unresolved prosecutions in England and Wales. Critics say victims of crime are being hugely impacted by the delays and in getting justice. It also led to a record 17,000 defendants being held on remand, taking up a fifth of spaces in overcrowded jails. No one wins out of this. Let's speak with Richard Miller, Head of Justice at the Law Society. Afternoon to you, Richard.
Hello.
I was trying to... This is one of those stories where you can't really perm a positive fact out of it, right?
It is very difficult. And British justice is the best in the world, but it is really...
And he's frozen in mid-sentence. We've had a couple of little tech hitches today, either our end or in some cases not. We will try and get Richard back, because this is a really important story. And if you've been in that position where you're waiting for a court case, now you might be the victim of the crime, or you might be the alleged perpetrator who knows they've done nothing wrong. You want that to happen fast. Richard, you were cut off in your prime due to the wonders of technology. You were in the midst of talking about how our justice is, at its core, is the best in the world.
Yes, but the system is in crisis at the moment. There are too many cases coming into the system, not enough being resolved by the system. It's the result of underfunding for many years. There are not enough lawyers, not enough judges, our courtrooms are crumbling, and it needs significant investment. With that investment, it can get back to being the best in the world that it always was. But at the moment, it doesn't have the capacity to deal with the number of cases coming in. The capacity needs to be increased, but also we need to look at whether we can reduce the number of cases coming into the system as well.
Yeah, and that there's the potential to compromise justice, I suppose, in doing that.
Yes, justice is really at risk. With these delays, we're talking about cases now being listed for hearing in 2028. So that's 3 years from now, and it's probably already 2 or 3 years from the crime that these get listed for a hearing.
Yeah.
Witnesses' memories fade over that time. The evidence is going to be less good.
Of course.
There's far more chance of the wrong result coming out of these cases. Justice really is severely impaired when there are these delays.
And of course, so you have victims in this equation, of course, who are waiting a long time, and they could be very sensitive cases where that element is more than unhelpful. In fact, it's damaging that somebody wants to see justice done. They want a result. You could have the alleged perpetrator, who may not be the perpetrator, but they want their day in court to be able to prove that point. Then you've got, as I mentioned, 17,000 people who are on remand. Some of those people might be innocent. They want their day in court as well. And even the ones that aren't, we want to see them in court. So everybody loses in this.
That's exactly right. And that is why there needs to be more investment. I have sympathy with what the Justice Secretary said today about the capacity of the system and whether the sitting hours that they are funding are the maximum capacity. But the problem is that the government is not at the moment putting in the additional investment needed to build that capacity across the other elements of the system.
Yeah.
So many parts that have to be got right. The police, prosecutors, the courts, the defence lawyers, all of it has to be properly invested in and has to be properly resourced. And that's what we're just not seeing at the moment, the whole system approach to make sure that everything is working.
And isn't one of the problems now, it's sort of much like the NHS waiting list in a way, that even if you threw £1 trillion into the system, you've still got a lack of infrastructure to deal with that, to get this backlog down. there simply isn't the amount of courtrooms, court time and lawyers and prison spaces that could deal with this at speed. It's something that even with the best will in the world, because the numbers have got so big, would still take many years to resolve.
That's exactly right, yes. The first step has got to be get to the stage where we are disposing of more cases than are coming into the system. But even once we've done that, there's still going to be this huge mass of cases that are stuck in the system at the moment. And as you say, it's having such an impact on defendants, on witnesses, on victims who are just not able to get on with their lives while this is all hanging over them. And that causes stress to people, which puts an additional burden on the NHS. It means that they're not able to concentrate on their jobs, so it reduces productivity. It's bad for the growth agenda. In so many ways, this backlog is harmful. And of course, providing criminal justice is one of the fundamentals of government. And if this is not being done, if people don't feel they are getting justice, then this is something so fundamental to society. The risks to society of just losing faith in our criminal justice system are really significant as well.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, trying to solve the meaning of life on a good day in the world of law, of course, because it's never straightforward. It's, you know, the labyrinthine world of law and courts and lawyers and systems and protocol, etc. And in a good way, you know, dictates that, you know, the system is, you know, has its complexities. So even when things are good, it's tricky. When things are bad, it becomes almost impossible.
That's right, yes. One of the things we've seen, for example, is that in the magistrates' court, a significant number of people facing a charge for which they could be imprisoned are unrepresented. And when you have an unrepresented defendant, it takes more time. They're more likely to plead guilty right to the end rather than being advised, actually, it's in your best interests to plead guilty. They're far more likely to take a lot longer in court because everything has to be explained to them. They're far more likely to raise irrelevant points and put bad arguments in the hearing, so they're less likely to get justice. It's a false economy to have people unrepresented in the courts.
Spot on. Listen, Richard, thank you for your time, sir. Really appreciate it. Richard Miller, Head of Justice at the Law Society. How long have you waited for justice? And I'm asking you that as someone who has been a victim of crime, but potentially someone who has been accused of something where you want your day in court because you didn't do it and you need to clear your name, whatever it happens to be. You hear of these cases that go on for years. I mean, as Richard just said then, there's some cases that aren't penciled in for the first hearing till 2028. And these are cases that might have already be 3 years old, so you could be 6 years. When you get to that stage, lots of things have changed. I mean, evidence, you know, might be irrefutable or the same as it always was, but people's memories change, people's feelings change. You know, if you're a victim, you might after 6 years go, do you know what, I now don't want to relive it. I did want to relive it, but I don't want to relive it now. I've kind of got used to the fact that I'm living life without it, but then there's no justice. How long have you had to wait? There is some breaking news in the world of law and order. The 16-year-old boy shot dead in Stockwell, that's an area of South London, on Tuesday has been named as Nathaniel Burrell by the Metropolitan Police. Nathaniel Burrell, a 16-year-old, shot dead in Stockwell. I hate reading out headlines such as that for many reasons. Firstly, I've read too many. They always involve, you know, a kid, basically, 16, 15, 14-year-old. Perpetrators, we don't know yet in this case, are invariably of similar age. And it throws up the same question, what the hell has happened when a 16-year-old is shot in daylight, by the way? It wasn't something at 3 in the morning, in broad daylight outside a tube station in the capital city. What has happened? How have we gone so wrong on so much of life that we end up increasingly reading out headlines such as this? Back to your calls. On Donald Trump, Dave is in London. Dave, how are you doing?
Yeah, hi Ian, how are you?
Good. I think you're the third Dave, maybe the fourth we've had on today. It must be, is it International Dave Day today or something?
Yeah, there's a wave of Daves, right?
A wave of Daves. Is that the collective noun? I think it must be.
Yeah. I've just I'll just say, looking at this Trump thing from the eyes of British people and the eyes of Americans, you said Julia had great things from Trump, you know, Doge, DEI, cutting waste, genders in sports, Ukraine. So I think from a British point of view, the top 3 issues they have with Trump is 1, Ukraine, 2, Ukraine, and 3, Ukraine.
Quite possibly.
And everything else. Now, but if you're an American, this is not the case. The biggest issue now that is floating right to the top, coming in at number 2 or number 1, isn't Ukraine or DEI or Doge. It's none of those things. It's tariffs.
Yeah.
So tariffs is the hottest thing going on, because in the last 4 days, all of the American stock markets have fallen to below where they were when Trump was elected.
Trump said it'll right itself, didn't he?
Yeah, but the problem he's got is no one who's a Republican or a Democrat actually believes that will happen, because he's really got it wrong on this.
And just to clarify, of course, tariffs ultimately make things more expensive. I mean, that's the bottom line, right? It's not, the tariff doesn't affect the person who's flogging the goods in that sense. It's the person that's buying the goods in at the American end.
Yeah. So I think he thinks governments pay this tariff. They don't. It gets passed on. So he thinks by applying tariffs, the car industry will improve in America, because everyone will move their factories to America.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, there's a case of a piston used in General Motors. It crosses the border to Canada, back to Mexico, and back to the USA 6 times. So it's going to incur 6 lots of 25% tariff.
The piston policy, as it shall now be known. So it has to. So why does it not just pay one tariff? The one that it pays when it enters America, or does it enter America more than once, you say?
Yeah. So it starts its life in Ontario.
Okay.
Then it's sent to Mexico for something to happen to it. It starts in America, then it goes to Canada, then back to America, then off to Mexico, back into America, and such and so forth. So every time that piston crosses the border, it increases. And that's just one example. So actually, some person said the average price of a Dodge truck was £80,000 on Monday. It is now 100 grand.
Wow.
It's gone up 10. It's 20 grand.
And that's a hypothetical, taking into account all of the different components.
No, it is actually now the new price of the car. And the second thing is, everybody that's got a pension in America, 401k, they are all linked to the stock market.
Of course.
And those stock markets have collapsed this week.
Yep.
So if they're staring at their 401ks right now, they will have gone down at least 10%. So if you've got $1 million in one of those things, you're looking at 100 grand has gone missing in 1 week.
Yeah. Can it right itself, though? I mean, because I was trying to explain to my little boy about tariffs, because he's 11, and at school, something in one of their lessons got, I think a teacher who's got good intent on just teaching the usual must have mentioned tariffs to them. And I said, well, one of the purposes for it is that, you know, in theory, and it's a loose theory because we know that it's a fairly international world when it comes to trading, is that you get people buying American. So they, rather than, we don't need to import the steel from China or Germany, we'll use the American steel. We'll buy American cars, or car manufacturers will come to America. That, on paper, that all sounds rather lovely, Dave, doesn't it?
Well, it does, but even if you're General Motors right now, you're jumping up and down saying the piston costs have gone up, as have all of the other costs.
Yeah.
So they're now going to lose sales. And I think he'll reverse this in the next 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
Because, however, he does seem obsessed with it. He sees himself as like Mr. Tambourine Man. He sees himself as Mr. Tariff Man. And no one in America can work out why he is fixated on this. Nobody. There is nobody arguing for this. And in his speech yesterday, when everyone was cheering him for all these other things on Julia's list, when the tariff, that bit came up, the Congress went quiet. Republicans did not get on their feet and applaud it.
Yeah.
Because they all sat there looking at it and going, you've really got this one wrong.
Yeah, that's always. He says the most beautiful word in the English language, doesn't he?
So it's tariffs, not Ukraine, not for an American.
Yeah. Don't have a broken piston is the advice. out of all of that. Dave, thank you. Dave down in London on Donald Trump. That's an interesting analysis. I'm not sure, by the way, that that in the UK, I know what he means about priorities. In America, you know, Ukraine is not the biggest thing, but the economy certainly is. Outside of America, in the UK, is it Ukraine when it comes to Donald Trump? I think it's just that it's Donald Trump. I think there is a genuine love for that kind of politics, and I don't necessarily mean it specifically in all respects. I've said this a gazillion times. Politics that doesn't kind of adopt or adhere to the conventional route map or template of being a politician in the West these days. See Trudeau or Macron or Rishi for details. And of course, Keir Starmer now doing the same thing. A politician that shoots from the hip is good, but there are dangers with that, and that's what I think Dave, our last caller, was talking about. You know, Trump and tariffs, it's become so intrinsically linked, those two things, that Trump just likes saying it, almost anything. So I get the love affair with a politician that is, you know, a little bit unconventional, and they don't come more unconventional than Trump, and I think we kind of welcome that. I certainly do. I like that idea that we don't have this weird, curious, perverse sort of groupthink governing every aspect of our lives. But I do think there's a love affair with Trump, and now J.D. Vance as well, even if people know jack about him. 0344 499 1000. Brand new voice of doom, by the way. A brand new voice is upon us. We'll tell you and play you that voice next on Talk.
She could have turned that into something like the entire world was actually wanting to expect Meghan to do the right thing and pull her head out of her, you know what, and make amends. And at least with her father, you know, this would have been a great opportunity, a special guest on the season premiere, and she can sit there and make her dad one of those rainbow fruit hats or whatever the things. I mean, it looked like a clown's hat, but you know, Dad would have enjoyed that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Someone here says, no name given, delays in the legal system. Try posting some hurty words on social media. You'll be arrested, tried and banged up for 2 years within a week. The delays are a choice by government. Well, I'm not sure they are a choice, really. I mean, the hurty words on social media, There's loads of cases that are pending and have been forever in that respect. We report on them all the time from 2 years back. The more recent thing came under the, quote, riots era, which is what expedited the trials. But the delays, the government, by choice, in the sense they didn't fund the system correctly. If you take away all sorts of element of the legal system, whether it's aid or whether it's court places, the cost implications of prisoners on remand, if you do all of that, yeah, I agree. You're going to pay a price for it. OK, Voice of Doom, brand new voice. Here it is.
What would you have done?
Who is that? Come on, you know who that is. Any ideas? Remember, don't phone in because there isn't a prize. But you can message in if you want to. Here it is again.
What would you have done?
Any ideas? It's the mystery voice thing, bit, but with a political angle to it. 87222 if you think you know. If we get a right answer, we'll tell you after the news. Here it is again.
What would you have done?
Who's that then? 87222. Back to the calls. It's another Dave in East Yorkshire. Dave, how you doing?
Yeah, hi Ian, how are you doing? Thank you.
Happy Dave Day, by the way.
Thank you. The people who ring up to criticise Trump and say he's not very nice, he's a narcissist. I get the fact the Oval Office on Friday was not a great watch, but people need to grow up. Not very nice. What's not very nice is the hundreds of thousands of, largely speaking, young men that have died in this war. And until Trump came along, there was no sign of that ending. And not very nice. He was a bit of a bully towards Zelensky. Trump didn't actually say anything until Zelensky tried to tell Trump what was going to happen to America. That's when he riled up. But put that to one side. I also want to thank Donald Trump for making us realise on this side of the Atlantic how ridiculous net zero is. You can't have a country if you aren't independent. If you don't have an independent energy source that's reliable, you're not a country. If you can't manufacture steel to build defence items, we get rid of our steel. So who's going to give us the steel to manufacture our defence? China. We all need to wake up and realise that what Europe's been doing for the last 30 years of open borders and green policies is the opposite of Trump. He's had 8 years of everyone telling him he's a Nazi. Why does he want to look after Europe? How we
100%. I mean, I think you've put it in quite a simplistic way, which is good, by the way. I think if you had to look at the specifics, no one wants to see people die. Zelensky's point was that we can have a peace deal with this mineral thing, but that could mean that Putin comes back for more down the line, and that was his concern, where more young people would die. So I don't think it's quite as simple as that, but in terms of their case, if you like. Dave, I get it. Thank you. Dave in East Yorkshire. Responses on that as well. Lines are open. Voice of Doom. Will we get a winner? Will we get anybody correctly identify this voice?
What would you have done?
87222 if you want to give it a go. Right now, 3 o'clock, let's get the latest news headlines here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This one comes in. Oh, in fact, I nearly went straight to a text then. I think it's probably best I tell you what's coming up in this hour, which is very, very interesting, including continuing talking about Donald Trump saying he'll work tirelessly to end the Ukraine war after receiving a positive letter from President Zelensky and strong signals, apparently, from Russia that they are also ready for peace. How will that manifest? What are you making of this latest development and your overarching views on the president a month or so into the big gig? Also this afternoon we're discussing 1 million people in England speak little or no English, according to official figures showing that 10% of foreign-born residents struggle with our language, fueling demands for stricter integration requirements. Also this afternoon, petrol prices keep rising for the 5th month straight, despite wholesale costs falling by 5p a litre since mid-January. I've noticed that at the petrol pump. They were down to about 131. I'm sure, a couple of months ago, a month ago maybe. That's about 145 now. What's going on? 0344 499 1000 is where you will find us. This one from Amanda. Just a thought, if we didn't have to deal with so many foreign criminals, there would be more time for the courts. That's absolutely true. If you sorted that, well, I tell you what there would be, if nothing else. There'd be more wiggle room in the prison system to deal with those prisoners on remand, because we've got a huge problem in that respect. Let's just quickly do the voice of doom. Have we got a winner? This was the voice we played you.
What would you have done?
Who is that? Let's hear it again.
What would you have done?
Somebody says Ed Miliband. I mean, you can't be serious. They couldn't sound any less like Ed Miliband. Let's hear it again, Amy.
What would you have done?
Ed Miliband. David Cameron. No, I kind of get the Cameron thing in a weird way. Phil Mitchell. No. Ken Clark. It is not. Robert Peston. No. Nor is it Gerald Howarth. Somebody here says Julia Hartley-Brewer, based on how she sounded yesterday. She was much deeper than that. No. Former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott is on the list as well. No, in fact, we haven't got a winner, which means this voice...
What would you have done?
Rolls over to tomorrow, about 2:45. Don't be missing none of it, kids. Now, Donald Trump says he appreciates Zelensky's renewed pledge to work with him on a peace deal days after the pair clashed during that exchange in the Oval Office. I know many people's jaws hit the ground, and some people kind of, as I said it then, I was just thinking back to it and all the memes that have kind of come out since then as well. But this was yesterday, the speech to Congress. President Trump revealed he'd received a letter from the Ukrainian leader thanking him for American support in the war against Russia. He's also indicated that Vladimir Putin was open to finding a resolution. Let's speak with Michael Graham, managing editor at Inside Sources, and, of course, our friend on Capitol Hill, top US political commentator and all-round good egg. Michael, good afternoon to you.
So do I have to audition to be the voice of doom? Could I?
You do, yeah. We were going to...
I am your father.
That's it, you see.
I can do this.
We'll cut that out and use that in a couple of weeks' time. Everyone will have forgotten you've done that by then, and we'll go, who is this person? Is it the guy from Star Wars?
Exactly.
So, listen, I mean, let's not go over what happened last Friday in the Oval Office. I mean, I'm sure, like everybody, your jaw would have hit the ground as well, Michael, because it doesn't really matter whether you're left or right or anywhere. It was a moment we thought, wow, we've never seen anything like this. Vance and Trump and Zelensky sort of battling it out in a way that just doesn't usually happen. I've been a big fan of unconventional approach to politics for probably since 2016 when Trump was first elected. Even if you don't like the guy, he doesn't speak from press releases. He doesn't do what some advisor tells him to do. He speaks, he shoots from the hip, he speaks, out as he sees it at the time. Sometimes gets it wrong, but there's something refreshing about that.
Yeah, and you've got a situation in Ukraine, I would argue it's similar to the situation you have with Gaza and Israel, where the status quo stinks. And so what's the worst that you can do? You shake over the box, you kick it over, maybe something comes loose. We'll see what happens. I'm curious to see, when does Trump make a turn
and hit Putin as hard as he's been hitting Vladimir Zelensky. Because, you know, when Putin says he wants peace, I think of that Mel Brooks movie where he's playing Hitler, you know, in a musical comedy, saying, "Peace, I just want peace. A little piece of Poland, a little piece of France, a little spot of Greece, a little slice of Turkey," you know. You know, we can have dying end tomorrow. Russia just has to stop shooting people. You know, you can have peace in the Middle East tomorrow. You know, Palestinians have to stop trying to kill Jews. I mean, it's like it's getting there. That's the problem. And so that's my question: is Trump consolidating Zelensky? You know, saying, look, here, now we've got something in the bag. I can go to Putin and say, here's what we've got. What are you going to give? And if Putin's answer is nothing, we're going to take what we've got and more. Then that'll be, I think, the pivotal point for Trump on this issue.
Yeah. And the bottom line, again, I'm going to sound like a stuck record to our audience because I say this about 20 times a day. Donald Trump has got this at the top of the agenda. He's put this on the table. Sleepy Joe would have kind of prolonged it. It would have carried on. There'd have been none of this stuff. Finally, European leaders, considering it's on their flipping doorstep, you might have thought that somewhere along the line they'd have been a bit more animated. Ursula von der Leyen, somebody had to wake her up from a crypt, I think, in order to get her to speak on this. She hadn't said a word for 3 years. Now suddenly she's turning up in London at this big European leaders powwow with Starmer. So finally they're talking. Trump did that, right? I mean, Trump literally did that, and he got it to the top of the table.
Look, you know, Germany's talking about massive expansion of military, which, by the way, would just mean getting them up to competent because, you know, their readiness is so bad.
Yeah, that's buying a tank, right?
Exactly. The UK's talking about it. And, you know, I don't know that having Vice President Vance dismiss, you know, UK, France, Germany, as they haven't fought a war in decades. The fact is they fought with the United States when the United States asked them in Afghanistan and in many countries in Iraq. And I thought that was a jerk move. But at the same time, his underlying point of, does anyone really believe they have the military readiness? And that's the, look, you don't have to convince me. You don't have to convince Donald Trump. You have to convince Vladimir Putin that if he remains aggressive, that he's going to have to fight. And this is, we said this the last time I was on with the show, but I think it is so important. We now know the Russian army. It's not maybe a paper tiger, but kind of like whatever, a macrame tiger or something like it. It's not this fearful, fearsome beast that it takes. I mean, let's face it. Right now, it looks like if you just gave the Baltic states, Finland, and a couple of gangs in the suburbs of South London a few guns, they could hold Russia off. I mean, that's how weak they are. This is the chance for Europe to step up and go, really, Russia? You want to compete with us? They can't do it. They have an economy the size of Italy's, running a gas station with nukes. And Europe could not put them in a box, but, stop any ideas they have of expansionism if Europe would get serious.
Yeah. And these are interesting times, given that, we could have this. The bit that intrigues me, Michael, and you can shine some light on this, the mineral deal. Now, I might have missed some of the memo here, but I didn't hear about the mineral deal till about half an hour ago. Nobody was talking about it. Nobody talked about the minerals, and suddenly it's the minerals. And we discussed this the other week, the bags of lithium and, diamonds. I don't know what the hell is in there. But all the stuff you get out the earth that makes things happen, like Elon's cars, for example.
Exactly.
But nonetheless, the supposition seems to be that the mineral deal is, and Vance said this yesterday as well, comes with security. What does that look like? Is that because some American people will therefore be working in Ukraine and Putin wouldn't attack if he thought there were Americans on the ground? Is it that,
Good
or
question.
Is it something more than that?
Is it that if you have some major corporate entities that are operating there, and then suddenly Russia moves, will America say, hey, you've crossed the line, we have to defend these players? If could they become a vital national interest? I mean, during the 70s and 80s, oil fields in Saudi Arabia were a vital American national interest. So if you could turn Ukraine's mineral wealth into the equivalent of Saudi oil, where the West understood we've got to protect this, that might do something. I just don't think that that's true. I think that there are too many other places right now. China processes about 95%, if I remember correctly, of all of these rare earths and other, critical minerals. It's not that other countries don't have them. It's just that they're hard to mine, they're spread out, and then they're expensive to process. And China has just thrown all of its, might and labor, cheap labor into this. And so there are a lot of things you have to do to monetize that wealth, which is why I would say Zelensky needs Europe on board, and Europe needs to believe that if Russia keeps moving west, it's going to involve them. America can't fix that. I don't like Trump's position. I would be more aggressive. I'm an old-fashioned, Reagan Republican, and I think we should be right there in the mix. But with or without us, the heavy lifting still should be done by Europe, and that's what Americans want to see. That's why I thought it was interesting. Trump had relatively few minutes of his speech last night, and he had 100 minutes to work with. We found out when it was over, the longest in history, that he spent on Ukraine. It was not top of mind for him last night.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I do wonder whether, if it is about Americans being in Ukraine working, which is the bit that, I mean, that's kind of got a bit of a human shield factor. The idea that
Americans aren't going to work there. It's going to be Ukrainian laborers.
Well, that's what I would have thought.
It's like in Saudi Arabia. You've got, a handful of American engineers. Yeah. But, it's not like the guy pick him up, honey, I'm going to go work in the oil fields. It's not how it works.
Well, the idea of Bob and Jack from Wyoming going over there with a couple of shovels and being told if you see a doodle bug, then shout and run, just in case.
I have a question for you.
Fire away, yes.
So, for years, I've had the pleasure of being part of European media, radio, et cetera, and the issue of illegal immigration has been there. And I remember when you weren't even allowed to talk about it, and I would have producers say, you can't talk about it that way. And now, obviously, we've turned a corner. Thank you, Angela Merkel. She's responsible for the shift because of her policies. Last night, Donald Trump pointed out that when Biden was president, we had single days where there were 12,000 illegal crossings, just one day at the southern border. We just had a month where there were about 8,000 for the whole month. We've had days with only 200, 300 people.
Wow.
And he looked at the crowd and said, for years, Democrats and media have said we have to have new legislation. Well, we just proved all we needed was a new president. And I'm just trying to imagine what the impact would be on your politics. If you had, if the government in power, whatever, where it's Keir Starmer or somebody else, could say, hey, we got the reins 2 months ago, and the number of crossings on the channel and the number of migrants, blah, blah, has gone from 13,000 to 200. I've got to believe that would be an amazing event. And that's one reason why, despite Trump's craziness, his approval rating still is remaining around 50-50, which is very good for him. He's got results.
Well, I got to tell you, the story you just told us about what has happened with Trump comes to office, the numbers go down. Think of that story you just told us and then just reverse it, because that's what's happened here. So we got an increase in people. I think this week, 1,000 people, 1,000 people in boats across a 25-mile piece of water is quite a thing. That's a lot. I keep making this point. If 1,000 people jumped the barriers at Heathrow Airport, we would be, the world's news would be there. This is just a daily thing. Yesterday, I think it was 400 or so, 300-400 yesterday. It hasn't changed. Keir Starmer's not got a grip on it. And do you know what? I think you touched on it there, Michael. It's not in his DNA. Whereas, you look at Trump, you think, this guy believes this. He wants this stopped. People believe he believes it.
But think about how powerful that was. He was able to look at the American people and say, I got here. This problem was hideous. I've been here, 40 days?
Yeah.
And the problem is gone. They said you had to do something complicated and you had to pass laws. That was always there, right? No, you just had to enforce the law. And I just wonder, does no political leader in Great Britain see the power of that? When you solve the problem, people love it. They don't, forget the yelling, forget the coming on talk TV and radio and complaining about it. Just fix it and you're the man, that's or woman, whatever.
Yeah, well, you might think so. We keep banging on about this almost every day, that it's not rocket. I mean, I know people use that phrase, it's not rocket. I mean, it genuinely is not rocket science. We are talking about some people in boats who are rowing across the channel. That's the thing you've got to stop. Starmer says, smash the gangs, the people facilitating it. I mean, talk about the wrong end of the telescope. This guy's clueless.
Well, look, so what's happening in the U.S. is we're having self-deportation. That is, people are turning around as they make their way up from Venezuela and other places, and they're just going back because they see, oh my gosh, what's the point? I don't want to go this. And so you can have that. The boats don't leave if they know that when you get there, you're going to be turned around. So you don't need rocket science. You need boat science and airplane science.
Yes,
you have a
boat
boat
science.
that you drive the other way. You have an airplane you fly the other way.
Good
and
old
once
boat.
people know that's going to happen.
Yeah. What science?
Man.
What science did you do at school? Boats. That's what I did.
Trump talked for 100 minutes last night, and the only sentence people are going to remember, and the only sentence he needs them to remember is, "They said it couldn't be done. I did it."
100%. Yeah, that left people with a very positive feel. Let me ask you this though, Michael. We had a caller just before the news who was saying that, you know, in terms of priorities, the big debate, as he saw it, the big debate in the States is tariffs and the knock-on effect of tariffs. He talked about a piston problem with General Motors, and if you're familiar with the piston story, that it gets tariffed about 3-4 times before it can be stuck under a car bonnet or a hood, as you would with your crazy language. So, yes, all of that. How big is that issue, and how damaging potential could that issue be?
Hey, my lorry has a boot in it. Just want you to know that.
All right.
So, anyway, most Americans don't really understand tariffs. They never talk about before. This is all of a Trump, you know, he made it a thing, so his supporters make it a thing. What they care about is what happens to them when they go put gas in their car. By the way, those prices you were sharing, we're paying about as much for a gallon as you're paying for a liter.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a little more, but not much. So that's the differential.
True.
And Americans are very price intolerant. If their home heating oil goes up, and a lot of New England and northern Midwest states get their heating oil from Canada. Gas prices, most of the gas used in that part of the country comes from Canada. The prices go up, people are going to complain, and they're not going to say, you know, go MAGA, or at least I got a red hat. They're going to go, what the heck? Hey, what happened?
Sure.
And that's why I think you're going to see a lot of shifting, rolling, stumbling. I don't get it. I have not understood how Trump has chosen to move. There's a lot of smart surrounded by a lot of stupid. Why not leave the stupid in the box and just play with the smart? Why not, for example, pound China with tariffs? You know, why not pound Russia with tariffs? I mean, why not just, you know, do stuff that people are going to like that has minimal impact on Americans? But, you know, he's doing it his way, and he's the president, and I'm here with you.
Yeah. What was that phrase?
One of us has done something terribly wrong.
And remind us of that phrase that people are going to remember from Congress yesterday.
For years, they told us that we needed new legislations. Turned out all you needed was a new president.
There it is. Brilliant. Listen, Michael, thank you. Michael Graham, managing editor at Inside Sources. He's our man on Capitol Hill. I should say, another bit of news that came in terms of Ukraine. The US has stopped sharing all intelligence with Ukraine. This is according to a Ukrainian source. So previously, the source with knowledge of the situation said that the halt in the flow of intelligence had been selective and only affected information that could be used for attacks inside Russia. But a few hours ago, the source said the exchange of all information was stopped. This move will be another blow for Kyiv after Trump decided to pause all military aid to Ukraine following that bust-up in the White House. I thought, you know, Trump might have continued with the green light on aid after the letter, but he ain't that swift in terms of rolling over that quickly. So maybe they will. But I think the issue on intelligence is pretty key, arguably bigger than anything in this. If they're going to stop getting intelligence from what previously was the biggest ally on the planet, where does that leave Ukraine? Well, it certainly leaves them with a sense of urgency to sign a deal. That's true enough. But is the deal, you know, worth what it's minerals? You know, what does that bring them in terms of security? Which J.D. Vance said, you know, the only secure deal is the mineral deal. Work it out if you can. 0344 499 1000.
Trump is not about destabilising Europe. He's not about destabilising NATO. He's not about, you know, being friends with Russia and not being friends with Ukraine. This whole project that Trump is involved in is about saving money, right? It's all about going through public spending, looking at what's been happening in some of these departments of state and slashing and burning because people are sick to death of the ridiculous expense. He sees Ukraine as a ridiculous expense. It's all about the money for him. It is not about, you know, annexing parts of Europe or rebuilding the New World Order or anything like that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Gary says, here we go again, another Noel fast-talking yank dismissing Russia as a gas station with nukes. Yeah, mate, that sounds quite dangerous to me, which probably explains why Trump is treating him with respect. Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, just with nukes. I mean, I think, in fairness to Michael Graham, he was referring to, you know, land battle and what can happen on land. Take the nukes out of it, as if you can extrapolate that fully. You never would. But in terms of their physical military, not as impressive as you might think, but their nuclear arsenal is to die for, apparently. Gary also says pension companies don't pay lower pensions to women because they're discriminated against them. It's because statistically women live longer than men. If a woman and a man have the same size pension pot, the provider will pay a small pension to the woman because they are likely to be paying her pension for longer than his. It's just maths. It's the same reason why if that woman had a life-limiting illness like cancer or heart disease, she would get more than the man, but we wouldn't say that he was being discriminated against for being healthy, would we? I didn't know. Is that right? That a female, in terms of private pensions, I think Gary's referring, because your state pension, you pay in, don't you? You pay in your fee, you get out, you know, whether you're male or female. I always thought that was just the same. Private ones maybe operate differently. This one in from Amanda. Sorry, I've done that one. This one in from Simon. My mate's wife started a painting and decorating company. This is talking about people, genders in jobs that aren't as typical as you might think. He says, my mate's wife started a painting and decorating company about 30 years ago and has never looked back for work. The reason is that she has a vast client list based predominantly women who, for whatever reason, feel safer with a woman in their homes. I totally get that as well. I think that makes perfect sense. Simon, thank you. Back to your calls. Adam in Nottingham on gender jobs. Adam, what have you got for us? Hello.
Hi, yeah, just purely based on my own, experiences, really. I had an apprentice, wonderful person, very capable and all that, but when it came to actually site joinery, where you have to be picking up units, heavy units and fitting them, unfortunately, she just did not have that upper body strength or even the grit to grip some of the tools, which, of course, is dangerous, and grip the materials to cut. And I even bought her grip strengthening things to help her and stuff. But I think she realised herself. She went into another job within the company, housing officer. She gets paid back the same as I do anyway for doing a different part of the job that I don't want to do, and I do what I do. But it was a strength thing. There is a thing there with certain jobs, but I'm all for anyone finding the way, and there are women joiners, but no, but in certain positions, it's just not fit for purpose. It's dangerous for her.
And I think mostly, I mean, we've seen it in the fire service, haven't we, where there seem to be, obviously in the police, I don't think there is that issue in the same way, is there? But in the fire service, there is.
No, I always think if you in the police, you should always simply because you never know what's coming around the corner with a robust bloke, who can handle situations. And I think in the fire service, women obviously work and do great jobs, but I think when it comes to pulling someone out of a building, dragging them down a ladder, you need to send the dude in. It's just physics in nature, really.
Yeah. Well, you'd yes, it is literally that. I mean, there's no other interpretation. It's literally that. Adam, thank you very much indeed. Adam in Nottingham. Lady Anne says, same man on Talk spouting anti-Donald rhetoric. I don't know who Lady Anne is referring to. It could be Michael Graham, could it? Michael Graham is a kind of die-hard Republican who certainly, I mean, it's kind of weird. I mean, it's kind of all right, isn't it, to spout anti-Trump rhetoric in the same way it's all right to spout anti-Corbyn or anti-Keir or anti-Kemi or anti-Nigel. I mean, we should teach kids that at school, shouldn't we? To spout that, if that's what they believe. Surely that's the whole essence of reminding yourself of living in a democracy, that you can attack the system without the fear of getting your head cut off or being sent to Siberia for many years. Something you couldn't do in Russia, by the way. But I think you'd struggle to do it a little bit in Ukraine, for that matter. But I'm not sure who Lady Anne is referring to, but I'd be surprised if it was Michael Graham. One here from Caroline. I was born and educated in New Zealand, but have dual British nationality through my English parents. I can tell you, having lived here and in New Zealand, that many Kiwis have come across have better English spelling and grammar than a lot of British people. So why Kiwis would have tougher entry rules here is beyond me. We have shared cultural values. 100%. It should be a kind of no-brainer, really, isn't it? If you come from Australia, New Zealand, Canada, America, those kind of countries, the commonality is surely, a big fat 80% of your visa form would be, well, hang on, like you're from the similar place. Language is a massive factor. Cultural values is a massive factor. But I'm not surprised about the spelling. I can't speak for other, but my spelling is terrible. My handwriting is terrible. I think it goes for a lot of people who have the same sense that we use so many computers and things these days. But spelling, yeah, no trucking believe in that. Thank you, Caroline, for that one. Tony in Bournemouth. When I first started driving buses, there were very few women drivers. Mainly they were clippies. The bus conductor, of course. Part of the reason was because lots of buses had no power steering, so they were very heavy to drive. But there were a few, and some old women passengers refused to get on a bus driven by a woman. It was nearly all elderly women that discriminated against women drivers. Strange. Yeah, I can absolutely see that. There is an old, I'm not getting on that bus, look. There's one of them women driving it. She might crash. You can sort of see the older lot thinking that. I've had people say getting on an aeroplane, being flown where the pilot is a woman, would be a question. Really? I've been on lots of flights where there's been a woman who's been the pilot. It doesn't make any difference. I mean, you want a good-looking one, obviously. It doesn't make any difference who's flying the plane. Come on, stop taking me seriously. No, it doesn't make any difference, surely, in jobs like that. And I think Tony is right. That, yeah, power steering has probably changed a lot about buses in that respect. Reg says, I worked in Holland for 5 years. I had a work contract. In order to obtain that work contract, I had to go to night school and learn how to speak Dutch. No language, no work contract. That's how it works over there. I wonder if it still does. Thank you, Reg, for that. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk about fuel in a second. Howard Cox will join us to talk about crime scenes at the petrol pump. And there's loads of those going on at the moment. Find out more next on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Be there tonight from 10 with Petri. Petri's been in the chair for years in the talk genre. She knows it backwards, always delivers a top show. 10 o'clock tonight with Petri Hoskin right here on Talk. Now, 25 to 4, by the way, motorists are being clobbered at the pump as forecourts pocket savings instead of passing them on. It's very naughty. I've noticed this. I thought, hang on, this petrol has gone up. It's like 5-10p a litre more than it was half an hour ago. Wholesale petrol prices have actually fallen 5p a litre since mid-January, but pump prices remain at a 6-month high. Petrol is now 139.65 a litre, with diesel at 146.48, the highest since last summer. And, of course, in some places, it's more than that. Let's speak to Howard Cox, founder of Fair Fuel UK. Check them out online if you haven't already and sign up to all that they do. Howard, good afternoon to you.
Hello, Ian. How are you, my friend?
I'm all right. Lovely to have you on. I mean, it's not the first time we've had this conversation. It's about the 100th time, isn't it, that something happens, the wholesale cost goes down, nothing changes on the forecourt.
Well, the fuel supply chain is just laughing at us again. It's just no government has got on top of this at all, Ian. And I don't know if you remember January of last year, when the Tories were in power, they introduced my pump watch scheme, which was supposed to give us honest pricing, transparency in pumps. And all the people that signed up to it, all the companies that signed up to it in the fuel supply chain, was supposed to give real-time update of wholesale prices and retail prices, so we could all see on an app. Well, it hasn't been taken up. It's been a volunteer scheme, and it's about as much use as a chocolate teapot.
Yeah.
I mean, what we're seeing at the moment is, yet again, the fuel supply chain are going unchecked, and no one in government, Tory or Labour, have got on top of this.
Why not? I mean, what is the sort of political resistance, if you like? Because you'd think there's only house points all round for politicians who are a little more stringent on this.
Well, there's a number of reasons with it. I think to be fair, the fuel supply chain has a lot of power in Westminster in terms of lobbying and controlling various things that are going on, and the oil companies especially. The thing is about this is, what I don't understand is, this is the best way to actually lower inflation, and every single chancellor knows that. I've sat with them for the last 15 years. And as you say, hundreds of times, 15 years I've been doing this and been calling it out. And I'm bloody angry that we're still talking about it. I mean, we all know that forecourts and the garages have high costs, electricity bills, energy prices going up, all those sorts of things. But at the moment, I'm telling you now that petrol is probably 7p more than it should be, and diesel's probably 10p more than it should be. And if you drive an average family car, that's a fiver you're paying extra that you needn't have to
fill up your car. Yeah, and it's like all of these things, isn't it? It's got a kind of the boiling frog scenario. You don't always notice it had gone up, and then suddenly you look around. And I'm there filling up the car the other day, and I looked at I couldn't quite see I thought, well, what is the amount today? Because it does differ. And I couldn't quite see the sign, but you get on the pump itself, of course, it tells you what it is per litre. And it was like 145 or something. This is unleaded. And I thought, hang on a second, it was like 131 about 6 weeks ago or something like that. Yeah. I mean, this is a huge rise.
And don't forget the 0.9p. You keep forgetting about that. I've often got into garages and says, look, can I have 0.1p back in change, please?
Yes, good point. Yeah, what happens if you only put 1 litre in?
Well, this is the point. They don't. It's rounded up, and you have to pay that situation. But what we need is a government, and I've written to Rachel Reeves only about 4 or 5 weeks ago to announce actually the pump watch scheme that we introduced is a good idea. It's supposed to give us real-time updates of wholesalers and retail prices, as I said. Can we have some legislative teeth in that? And if it's not adhered to, the people behind it in the fuel supply chain, and I don't blame the garage forecourt so much, a lot of them are under a lot of pressure from their wholesalers further up, but they should be, subject to real fiscal punishment. They should be fined big time. Then watch them bring the prices down.
Yeah, spot on. Listen, Howard, you take care. Great to have you on with us as ever. Howard Cox, founder of Fair Fuel UK. It's murder out there at the pumps. It's not a good place to be, filling up your car, running the flipping thing, insuring it, road to man alive. And, of course, now we live in a curious world where governments are quite relaxed about that. In fact, it's that you get bragging rights if you can penalise the motorist. Bragging rights. There's no hiding it. You don't need to. You don't want to. If you're Ed Miliband, you're perfectly happy to say, you know, this has gone up and that's gone up connected to driving a car, because they want the world to be out of their cars. And the impracticalities of doing that are so vast. I mean, it's so obvious for people to see. I was in my neck of the woods. They're putting a cycle lane in. I don't know how much this cycle lane cost. This is Sevenoaks Council. I've no idea, but I'm guessing that to churn up a third of a highway across the width, so it was a width of 2 cars, they've taken a third of it and turned it into a bus lane for quite a substantial distance. And it's still ongoing, the roadworks, by the way. That's going to cost tens and tens of thousands of pounds, right? They're even working over the weekend to get it done. And then make the road narrower, because there's nowhere else for the cars to go. So at the moment it's a set of traffic lights and all that going on. And it just made me wonder that whilst, you know, it's great that you can cycle. If you can cycle and you can do it safely, I totally get that. I think we all endorse that. But I was just wondering, while I was sitting there at the traffic lights in about a queue of 10,000 cars, how many of these cars could ditch their car right now? How many of these vehicles could ditch their car and jump on a bike? And you look around you and go, well, I can see at least 30% of what I'm looking at are vans that are related to work. So they're not going to be on a bike. The school that's nearby, because there is a school nearby on this stretch of road, on this very stretch of road, is near some houses, but kids come from a wide catchment area for that. They're not going to be on a bike either. And there's a supermarket, big supermarket, there's a Sainsbury's just down the way, and you ain't going to get there to do your shopping on a bike. And there's all the usual, you know, Halfords and those kind of stores and Wicks and whatever. So you're not... I don't know how many of the queue of traffic could have conceivably gone to a bike, and yet the council have found the money at a time when they can't fill a flipping pothole, have found the money to build a cycle lane. And whilst I understand the necessity to, you know, make sure that everybody can have a safe experience on the roads, of all things you might spend money on when you've got a pothole crisis, a cycle lane. And you make the road narrower as well. But this is now done with impunity. It's now done with a sense of a badge of honour. Look what we've done. We've got the cycle lane in. You say, well, you're not going to get these people in the cars onto the cycle lane. It's just not practical that would happen. Getting people to convert to cycling is like getting people to sign up to join a gym. Some will do it, most won't. This will be George in Portsmouth on fuel. What have you got for us, George? Afternoon to you.
Hello, yeah, good afternoon. So I guess my point is, as much as I kind of believe that markets should be as free as they should be, at what point should we expect, especially in this cost of living crisis, for the government to intervene? Because if they're to regulate it like more, because if you're looking at kind of actually the knock-on effect this has, so prices of fuel being high, that has a massive knock-on effect on the price of goods. It's driving the cost of living. Even much so that, you know, cost of living has always probably been an issue for people kind of lower within the working class, but now you've got middle class families which are having to look at how they're spending their money and things like that. So actually how far should we be expecting the government to actually intervene here and say, actually, do you know what, this isn't on and you need to be, and they need to be regulated more, which I know can be a contentious issue when people want free markets at the same time.
This is very true. And is that always going to be a balancing act, though, that nobody ever fulfills to everybody's satisfaction?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, nobody's ever going to be fully satisfied. But I would definitely argue that we're, if not past the point, getting to the point where we should at least be expecting, especially, you know, we've got a supposedly like left government in that they should be at least trying to regulate or having conversations with the oil companies, or even something else where, you know, we know that we need to be driving more towards kind of having greener energy, or at least something where the profits go towards investment in greener energy and transitioning over from fossil fuels, as people are claiming like this is an issue as well. But at the minute, it's kind of like these oil companies are just lining their pockets whilst kind of everyone else is kind of struggling more and more.
Yeah, and I don't know what political pressure can be put on companies, but it seems very little. And bearing in mind, oil companies are supposedly in a dying business, George. Supposedly.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of find that hard to believe when you see how like their profit margins, and also that if you kind of look at how many pensions are still investing in oil companies,
100%,
getting good returns on them.
And I can't, was it Shell or BP this week said, or last week said they're going to, you know, carry on drilling and a little harder and faster than they were?
So I didn't see that actually, but it doesn't surprise me.
Well, they'd realised they can't quite get what they want out of renewables, because they've all obviously tried to, you know, in the same way that people who used to make Marlboro cigarettes, you know, now make clothing or whatever it is, and vapes, because they're expanding into other areas. I think the oil companies have tried to do a bit of that, but I don't know how far they've got in the renewable department. But certainly one of the big guys said, you know, we can't really make this work with any certainly no shareholder satisfaction.
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of similar with, I know it's a bit off point, but kind of people wanting to go, being pushed to get in towards like electric cars and things like that. With the price of them, and again, this again comes into kind of the role you expect the government to play. If the government aren't going to offer any like what they want us to become greener, they want us to be a greener country, which is absolutely like right and fair, and we should be doing that. We need to like look after our planet. But if there's going to be no regulation, if there's going to be no help for kind of the ordinary working person to get there, then I don't think it's fair for the owners to be put on them, really, and that pressure to be put on them.
100%. It's a great call, George. Thank you very much indeed for that. I think that is the point, isn't it? It's very expensive. This transition is very expensive, but it's underpinned by a kind of prophecy of doom that if it's not done, the world's going to end. Now, I'll say it again. You know, I agree with Dale Vince. I agree with every environmentalist. I agree that we want to have a cleaner planet to live on. It would be an extraordinary thing to say, I don't want cleaner energy, but of course you want efficient energy as well. You want reliable energy. And I think the Ed Miliband position is, well, there's going to be a bit of a hiatus between, you know, it's going to be a bit pricey for a bit, and it might not be as hyper efficient for a bit, but don't you worry, fast forward 30 years, then everything's going to be, you know, tickety-boo. Right, I think that's the big ask. And that, to me, is the pinch point of the whole debate. It's the length of time and the kind of unknown... was it Donald Rumsfeld and his known unknowns? There's too many known unknowns. There's things we know, there's things we don't know. There's things we know we don't know, and there's things we don't unknow that we do know. That great speech he gave. And everybody looked to Scott, saying, what did he say? But we're all willing to believe, well, he must know something we don't know. I think that's the Miliband position. So there's loads of known unknowns, and until there is, run your windmills and your solar farms in parallel, in tandem with what we have now, but don't cement over it just yet. You know, maybe want to hang around a bit just in case. 0344 499 1000. Jeremy Carl's going to be here after the news at 4. Before then, he'll pitch up in this studio to tell us what is going on the big programme. All of that and more on its way here on Talk.
She could have turned that into something like the entire world was actually wanting to expect Meghan to do the right thing and pull her head out of her, you know what, and make amends. And at least with her father, you know, this would have been a great opportunity, a special guest on the season premiere, and she can sit there and make her dad one of those rainbow fruit hats or whatever the things. I mean, it looked like a clown's hat, but you know, Dad would have enjoyed that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This from Will, who says, your speaker who said about a piston having multiple duties or tariffs is wrong. Multiple cross-border imports are done on a temporary import basis. It does not get 5 or 6 separate import duties. Also, anyone who knows the financial markets understand they go up and they go down. I did question slightly when he said about, you know, the multiple, isn't there not just one tariff? Because that would make it extraordinary for anybody, wouldn't it? I mean, literally anybody, if you were if it jumped across a border. Which is the same guy, I think, that Lady Anne was referring to, the anti-Donald rhetoric. But, you know, let's bring it on. Let's have lots of anti-political rhetoric, because that's what makes us as people stronger, when we encourage that, even if it's somebody attacking the party or the person that you love. I want to see much more of it, frankly. Where would we be without some anti-Keir rhetoric, for goodness sake? Well, we'd be nowhere on this programme. Matt's in Cheshire. Matt, have you got some anti or pro-Trump rhetoric for us?
Sure, yeah, I have here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I think I've been saying for since the beginning, it's not how Trump does things, it's what Trump does. And in Britain, we have a civilized, we have politicians that are civil in the way they speak, and that's led to an uncivilized society, almost a barbaric streets in Britain. In America, they don't care how people speak as long as they get things done. And Trump has opened a sort of new wormhole into another universe of, it doesn't really matter what you say as long as you get the things you promise to do done. Our politicians are persistently saying things in nice upper middle class accents, and for 25 years none of them have done anything that the British people wanted.
Well, that's going to be the test of Donald Trump, isn't it? Because the example that always comes up, and I can never quite verify this fully, is that on immigration last time round, he didn't do any better than Obama. In fact, Obama did better than Trump. Now, I know it depends on who you ask in terms of what result you get, but the perception is that Trump, you know, pretty much emptied the country of illegal immigrants.
Well, one, he didn't have the two chambers. He didn't have the Senate and the House last time, did he? He was an amateur with no experience of Washington.
True.
They put obstacles in his way at every. They put every obstacle in his way.
Yeah.
He was prepared from day one, obviously, and this has been on his mind while he was out of office. And I can't remember the guy. Is he called Mike Holman? The guy who's in charge of the deportation.
Okay. Well, the border guy.
The ICE guy.
Okay.
He was also ready from day one.
Yeah.
So the figures suggest he is doing what he said on the border.
And that's, in fact, what's encouraging about that, Matt, is not just Trump being there is making that happen, in addition to whatever they're physically doing.
Exactly, just the presence of him, the way he is, the belligerence of him, What would we give in Britain now just to have somebody to stop all the immigration?
Well, I mean, last July, if you were sitting there on the beaches of Calais wondering, you know, oh, maybe in a year's time I'll make that journey, and then suddenly Keir Starmer won the election, you'd think it was Christmas, wouldn't you? You'd think, well, wow. I thought I might have some problems with this Rwanda thing hanging around, wasn't sure. I'll probably still do it, but now Starmer's in, so happy days. We don't have a politician that speaks like that, really. We have Farage who speaks like that.
Yeah, we do, yeah. There are Lee Anderson, maybe.
Yeah.
Basically, everybody reform, maybe Robert Jenrick. But anybody that thought Keir Starmer was even going to do 1% of what Trump would do, I'm sure they realise now they made a massive mistake.
Well, they're just not that kind of leader, are they? I mean, they're not leaders at all, really. They're kind of managers in positions, whereas Trump is, you know, he's a boss. And he's been a boss all his life, and a successful one. He's fought hard, and I know he's had a good life, and you know, he was born into money. I get all of that, but he knows how to cut a deal. He knows how to spot BS. He knows how to ram it home if he needs to. And that's the glory of the man. Listen, Matt, I've got to stop there because we've hit the clock, but thank you. Sue says, you say there's no effective opposition to Trump in America. Where is the effective opposition to Starmer and this far-left ideological crew? I 100% agree with Sue. The opposition is woeful at the moment, and right now you've got 5 MPs on the backbenches in Reform UK who are making much more noise, whether you love them or hate them. God, I need to jump out my skin then. Love them or hate them, they are certainly, I think, creating more of a narrative and informing the conversation than the official opposition.
Just had two chocolate hobnobs.
Is there hobnobs out there?
Oh, yeah. Nice.
Who's custodian
I walked in
of the
to hear
hobnob?
you, a broadcasting legend, say he's very good at ramming it home, and you smiled slightly.
Sorry.
What were you talking about?
Donald Trump, bizarrely.
Is it just me, increasingly, and I hear all these people on all sorts of stations here, why can't these people just accept that Donald Trump is what Donald Trump is? And there are many things that many people would dislike about Donald Trump, but you have to say that from Friday morning to Tuesday afternoon, despite what was thrown at him, Zelensky caved and is back at the table.
Yeah, 100%.
I think the most interesting thing is that Starmer and Macron are considering accompanying Zelensky to the White House for his next. There's a couple of sort of bleeding henchmen. What happens if Trump tells Zelensky to do one? Can you imagine Starmer going, "Oh, don't be horrible to my mates"?
So like a couple of bouncers.
Yeah, a couple of bouncers. Starmer's been left looking like the boy on the side of the field that nobody wants to talk to, hasn't he? Because, you know, he said, we must keep the weapons going. And overnight, Trump went, we're not doing any more weapons, and didn't tell him. Do you know what I mean? He's trying to aspire to being this sort of leader.
Learning the hard way, isn't
the coalition of the unwilling, or the, what was it Mike called it? The coalition of the wilting, which is quite good.
Well, it is it's certainly that's for sure.
It's just watching Trump do that Congress speech last night, and the Democrats sat there with their little things going, liar, liar, you lost, deal with it. It's a fact.
It's unbelievable. And if you want, you know, I keep saying this to people when we talk about weird stories, you know, bizarre kind of wokey type stories. And then the same people scratch it and go, how did Donald Trump win this election? Who is this Donald Trump? Well, because of this stuff. And because if you watch the Congress speech and you hear the way he delivers, and, you know, I know he's not conventional, that's the attraction of him.
It's really simple to me. It's really simple to me. And I keep saying this about British politicians. We'll never have one. Maybe Nigel is the one. I don't know. This is what I stand for, and if you vote for me, this is what I will do.
Yeah.
If you don't want to vote for me, don't. If you do, I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Deal with it, Democrats. They were like petulant kids. It was extraordinary watching them.
It's kind of funny when you look back on it. I know Trump claims that the last election was stolen, but you look back at it and think, isn't it funny that Joe Biden was ever president? And I said to Michael Graham, our American man that we spoke to, I said to him the other day, I think the history books will just erase